Chapter 1630. Lu Jin was confused. He quickly touched Gu Nianji's forehead with his hand and said in confusion, "You don't have a fever. What New Year's gift? I haven't given it to you yet." Seeing Lu Jin's concerned and puzzled expression, Gu Nianji almost revealed her guess. However, when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she remembered the importance of this matter. She remembered He Qingjian's attitude towards Hua Xiaoheng, that he would rather kill the wrong person than let him go, so she swallowed all her excitement and joy. However, her emotions were fluctuating like a level 12 storm. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand while laughing and crying at the same time. She choked and said, "This is the best New Year gift." She picked up the remote control and pressed the play button. On the television, the last 10 seconds of the countdown had already begun in New York's Times Square. The faceted prismatic sphere, commonly known as the Big Apple, was 12 feet in diameter and weighed more than 10,000 pounds. The surface of the sphere was covered with 2,688 small crystal triangles, and there were 672 LED light-emitting devices inside. When the LEDs were lit up, the entire sphere could display more than 16 million different colors and light combinations. On a cold winter night, the shining Big Apple was like the golden apple held in the hands of the three goddesses of beauty in Greek mythology. It symbolized both wisdom and power, and it had an indiscriminate appeal to everyone. The 2 million people in the square waved their glow sticks and counted down loudly, 10, 9, 8, 7. As everyone counted down, the Big Apple-like fluorescent sphere slowly descended with the music that resounded through the sky. Thousands of colorful rays of light shot out from the sphere, decorating the night sky of Times Square like a fairyland. Right at this moment, the ball that was like a big apple had just descended halfway when it suddenly let out an earth-shattering bang, and then the entire ball split open from the middle. A tear gas was quickly released from the sphere, and the entire Times Square was instantly shrouded in smoke. Not only were the 2 million people in Times Square dumbfounded, but all the television viewers around the world who were watching the Big Apple fall were also dumbfounded. What was going on? Was there a new stunt for the fall of the Big Apple this year? Those who had such thoughts didn't even last a second before they realized that they were overthinking. On the live TV, the huge crowd began to run in panic. Many of the aerial shots taken by drones were blocked by the gas released from the Big Apple. The TV was foggy and the scene of the scene could not be seen. All he could hear was the host talking to the director in gibberish, not knowing what emergency measures to take. Then, a crackling sound came from the television like firecrackers suddenly exploding in front of the camera. However, firecrackers were banned in New York's Times Square at this time. How could someone set off firecrackers at this time? Gu Nianji was only stunned for a moment before the image on the television became clear. The host was saying to the camera in horror, "My God! God! Somebody wants to kill the president? Oh my God! Someone is trying to assassinate the president." Soon, members of the FBI's Special Task Force (SWAT) and the president's Special Protection Team rushed into the crowd with loaded guns and rushed toward their blonde president. New York's Times Square was called a square, but it was actually a very small square. It couldn't accommodate 2 million people at all. It had sealed off several streets around it to barely accommodate so many people. The annual security checks were extremely strict, but they didn't expect such a loophole to occur. The chaos at the scene with so many people was even more terrifying. There were people running and crying everywhere. Many people fell to the ground and were seriously injured from being trampled on. However, these ordinary people couldn't compete with the members of the Special Task Force who were armed. Soon, they opened up a path in the crowd and escorted the president into the emergency building on the side of Times Square. At this time, the members of the Special Task Force used their bodies to form a meat shield to protect the president's personal safety. The sporadic gunshots in Times Square were soon suppressed by the members of the FBI's Special Task Force. Police cars drove in one by one, and countless police lights flashed in Times Square, covering the starlight of the Big Apple. 10 minutes later, the chaotic situation was finally under control. The panicked crowd also calmed down under the comfort of the police. After the danger, everyone looked at each other and felt like they had survived a disaster. The last second of the countdown had passed. The new year had arrived and we were all still alive. It was great. Everyone couldn't help hugging and kissing the people around them to commemorate this unforgettable countdown to the new year. Gu Nianji's heart was so flustered that it was about to jump out of her throat. She knew that the TV was talking about someone trying to assassinate the President of the United States, and it had nothing to do with the Soviets. However, she still couldn't help but worry about the ace of the Far East, who was likely to be her Major General Hua. Lu Jin hadn't expected such a situation to happen in a simple countdown, so he quickly called Lu Yuan over to watch it together. Lu Yuan stared at the TV for a while, then suddenly pointed to a small spot in the lower right corner of the TV and said, "Someone is trying to fish in troubled waters. The target isn't the President of the United States at all. I think they've already succeeded." Gu Nianji's pretty face was pale, and her voice was so hoarse that she couldn't speak. The target isn't the President of the United States? Then who is the target? Who did it? Lu Yuan pointed to the spot and said, "The camera should turn around soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the TV reporter in charge of the live broadcast from New York walked over with a camera and said in surprise, "Here. Someone has fallen here." The host quickly ran over and said to the camera, "In this chaos, our president is lucky to be safe and sound, but the visiting VIPs aren't so lucky." Yeltsin, the head of the Moscow Municipal Committee of the Soviet Union, and Gorbachev, the chairman of the Soviet Youth Affairs Standing Committee, have been confirmed to have been hit by a stray bullet and have been sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. Behind her, a few people in white chemical suits carried 2 stretchers into the ambulance. Gu Nianji's eyes were sharp and she saw Hua Xiaoheng sitting in the ambulance. His expression was stern and his gaze was stern. His Soviet military uniform coat was covered in dust, and one of his arms was covered in blood. He covered his arm with one hand and was talking to the doctor across from him. Gu Nianji stared at the TV for a while and realized that the real Peter she had seen before had disappeared. What was going on? Gu Nianji felt like she wanted some peace and quiet. She took a step back with her phone in her hand and said weakly, "Dad, Uncle Lu, I'm not feeling well. I need to go back and lie down for a while. Do you want to have some breakfast before going to bed?" Lu Jin saw that her expression was very ugly and thought that she had been frightened by the scene just now. He said with lingering fear, "Fortunately, Nianji rejected my suggestion. Otherwise we would be the ones panicking right now." Lu Yuan frowned and said, "You still want to go to Times Square to watch the countdown?" "I'm doing this for Nianji's sake." Lu Jin rubbed his head awkwardly. "This is Nianji's first year here for the new year. I want to give her an unforgettable experience. If you had gone to New York with Nianji yesterday, then you would have really given her an unforgettable experience." Lu Yuan sat down on the sofa and began to read the follow-up report of the entire incident. Gu Nianji returned to her bedroom and locked the door with a bang. She couldn't sleep at all. Her mind was in a mess as she paced around the room. 2 Peters and 2 Hua Xiaoheng were spinning around in her mind like windmills. They were so fast that she couldn't catch them at all. She had thought that there was no Peter in this world because Hua Xiaoheng had occupied Peter's position. Even his Russian name was exactly the same as Peter's. In the end, the glimpse she had just seen had completely overturned her understanding. It turned out that there was a counterpart in this world, Peter. And he seemed to know this ace of the Far East, Peter. What did this mean? Gu Nianji's palms began to sweat as she held her phone. She was sure that the identity of the ace of the Far East, Hua Xiaoheng as Peter, was definitely fake, but was he Major General Hua from the other world as she had thought? She remembered the differences between this ace of the Far East, Peter, and Major General Hua from the other world. For example, their voices were different. Major General Hua's voice was as deep as a bell, while the voice of the ace of the Far East, Hua Xiaoheng, was a clear baritone. Also, this ace of the Far East, Hua Xiaoheng's appearance was even more exquisite and handsome, as if he had been carefully groomed. Gu Nianji still remembered the first time she had seen this ace of the Far East, Hua Xiaoheng. She had paid special attention to his hands. They were flawless, and there weren't even any calluses on the fingertips of people who used guns all year round. That's right. This was actually a flaw. Even if this person was really the ace of the Far East, Peter, he was still someone who used guns all year round. How could his fingertips be so flawless that there weren't even calluses? Therefore he had to have completely groomed himself from head to toe. As for the voice, it was even easier to explain. This kind of big shot in the intelligence world could disguise himself as someone else at any time. Even relatives and friends who had been friends for many years would not recognize him when they met. Gu Nianji looked up abruptly and saw her eyes shining like stars in the mirror on the dressing table in the bedroom. Her expression was twisted with excitement. How could she have forgotten? What was Major General Hua's job? He had started as a small soldier and spent 10 years to become a big shot in the intelligence world. On this special front, none of the people who were able to fight their way out of the encirclement and sit in a high position had relied on luck or the help of others. Not only did they have to be courageous and knowledgeable, but they also had to be outstanding in terms of ability, intelligence, and self-control. This was because those who were not outstanding had already used their lives to survive. Hua Xiaoheng was one of the most outstanding members. Gu Nianji clenched her right fist and punched her left hand heavily. A relieved smile appeared on her face. She threw herself onto the bed and happily rolled around twice with the blanket in her arms. She was so happy, so happy, so happy. She was so happy that words could not describe her happiness. Only the corners of her lips that could not be calmed and her eyes that were narrowed into slits could prove how happy she was. Just as she was immersed in the countless images of the reunion between the two of them, her cell phone rang at an inopportune time. Gu Nianji actually did not want to answer the phone. However, her phone continued to ring, so she reached out to take a look. It was Hijichu. Gu Nianji sat up from the bed and lazily swiped open her phone to answer the call. Hello, young Master He? Happy New Year. Hijichu. He was still in his friend's villa, and there was still a mess from last night's revelry. He had been waiting for Gu Nianji's call since 12 o'clock yesterday, but there was no call until now. He had no choice but to call her himself. You said yesterday that you would call me as soon as possible to wish me a happy new year. Hijichu said lightly as his fingers shook the ash from his cigarette. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and smiled embarrassedly. I fell asleep last night and didn't have time to count down to snatch the red packet. I only woke up just now. By the way, if you don't believe me, I can turn on the video call for you. As she spoke, Gu Nianji turned on the video call. Hijichu only saw the image of Gu Nianji just waking up on the phone screen. Her face was snow white, but her cheeks were rosy red. Her hair was messy behind her back, her home clothes were wrinkled, and the blanket on the bed was twisted. She did indeed look like she had just woken up. Hijichu shook his head speechlessly. What's wrong? Are you still tired from yesterday's lawsuit? Gu Nianji nodded honestly. Yes, I was sleepy after coming back for dinner yesterday. I even said I would wake up at 12 o'clock to look at the countdown, but I slept until noon today. Hijichu asked, Have you had breakfast? Do you want me to bring you breakfast? No need, I'll go out to eat later. Gu Nianji smiled slyly. I still want to go back to sleep now. Bye-bye, young Master He. She waved at the phone camera and turned off the video. She lay back on the bed and raised her phone to search for the chaos that had happened in New York's Times Square during the countdown. Hijichu hung up the phone and stood up from his seat. He saw Xie Qingying walking over with a plate in her hands. She smiled and said, Young Master He, you didn't sleep all night and didn't eat much. You drank all the red wine. Here, have some lunch. She placed a freshly made Western meal in front of Hijichu. On the plate, there was a small bowl of Caesar salad, a black pepper steak, a plate of mashed potatoes and a glass of warm milk. This glass of warm milk reminded Hijichu of Gu Nianji. He couldn't help but take a sip. After drinking, he didn't notice that a circle of white milk foam appeared above his lips. The cold and handsome man suddenly looked a little childish. This kind of contrast was very attractive. Xie Qingying took a tissue and gently wiped the white milk foam on the side of his upper lip. She said angrily, Young Master He, how old are you? How can you drink milk like this? Hijichu was caught off guard. Xie Qingying held his chin and carefully wiped away the milk foam on the side of his mouth. Xie Qingying's eyes flashed as she looked at Hijichu's motionless expression. She couldn't help kissing him. This was today's chapter. Chapter 1619, You'll know when an expert makes a move. There was no more at night. He was working overtime today. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1631. Xie Qingying's movements were gentle and swift. She stood on her tiptoes and held Hijichu's cheek. She pecked him lightly on the lips. His lips were not as cold as he looked. Instead, they were warm and smooth like lychee jelly. Hijichu didn't turn his head. He continued to stand motionlessly in front of the dining table, an unfinished cigarette in one hand. He looked down at Xie Qingying. From this angle, he could see that Xie Qingying's pretty face was similar to Gu Nianji's. His heart softened and he didn't push her away in time. After Xie Qingying was done with the kiss, she immediately let go of him and took a step back. She tapped her lips with her finger and said playfully, A belated New Year's kiss. Consider it my New Year's gift to you. Happy New Year, Hijichu. Hijichu grunted indifferently and didn't say anything else. His expression was still calm and indifferent. He raised his hand and took a puff of his cigarette. He nodded casually and sat down to eat the food Xie Qingying brought him. Please make me a cup of black coffee. Hijichu didn't even look up as he extinguished his cigarette in the ashtray and picked up his knife and fork to begin cutting his steak. Okay, I'll be right there. Xie Qingying was anxious and a little embarrassed. Fortunately, Hijichu didn't say anything. It was just like a friendly kiss between friends. The only difference was that she didn't kiss his cheek, but his lips. Xie Qingying got up to make Hijichu black coffee. She walked through the messy living room, passed by her friends sleeping on the living room sofa, and arrived at the kitchen. In the living room as soon as she left, one of He Qingjian's personal secretaries, old Zhou, came to He Jichu and said with a smile, "Young Master He, did you have a good time yesterday?" He Jichu looked up at him and wiped his mouth with a tissue. "I'm fine. What's wrong? Is there anything wrong with my father?" Lao Zhou laughed and winked at He Jichu. He said, "General, he was worried about young Master He, so he asked me to come and take a look. In the end I saw a glimpse of spring." He Jichu couldn't help but laugh. "Old Zhou, I didn't know you were so nosy." "That's not gossip. I saw it with my own eyes." Old Zhou said emotionally, "Actually Miss Ye is quite good. Other than Miss Gu, General He only likes Miss Ye. I didn't expect young Master He to have the same taste as General He." He Jichu, he shrugged. "We're friends? You're thinking too much." Old Zhou smiled without saying a word. In the past, other than Gu Nianji, young Master He had avoided other women. How could any woman be within a meter of him? Even when Shuyi, who had once replaced Gu Nianji, had never had physical contact with him. In Lao Zhou's opinion, Xie Qingying was already a special case with He Jichu. He Jichu didn't comment, nor would he deliberately deny it. That would make it seem like there was no silver here. He took out a lighter, lit another cigarette and asked, "What's the matter? I'm not a 3-year-old kid who has to check on me when I don't return home at night?" He Qingjian must have asked his personal secretary to look for him for something else. Old Zhou smiled and coughed softly. "Something did happen. Young Master He, let's go back and talk." He Jichu nodded. He stood up, picked up his coat and put it on his arm. He followed old Zhou to the door. Just as he walked out of the living room, he happened to meet Xie Qingying, who had made coffee. "Young Master He, where are you going?" "The coffee is ready." She walked over with a tray in her hand and a smile on her face. He Jichu nodded and said coldly, "Something happened at home, so I'll go back first. I'll contact you later." The person walking beside him was He Qingjian's personal secretary, old Zhou. Xie Qingying also recognized him. He nodded at her with a smile and greeted her politely, "Miss Xie." "Okay, I'll contact you later," Xie Qingying said subconsciously and nodded at old Zhou. She watched as He Jichu and his father's personal secretary, old Zhou, turned around and left. Her best friend sneaked over and said with a smile, "Qingying, you're amazing. How is it? Did you take down young Master He?" She grabbed at the air with her hand and made a take him down gesture. Xie Qingying was amused by her and said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? I was impulsive just now. Young Master He gave me face and didn't fall out with me in front of me." He Jichu had been playing with his phone by the window in the living room all night last night. Who could get close to him? "Tiske. That's more than just giving you face. If it was someone else who kissed him, he would have already shot that daring person with a gun. It's probably you." Her best friend looked her up and down and pursed her lips into a smile. "It's obvious that young Master He can't bear to part with her. F***CKU. Xie Qingying pushed her and turned around to pick up her handbag. She said goodbye to the host and left with her best friend. She drove her car on the empty highway. Her face was a little hot, and her heart was also a little anxious. Her best friend was sitting in the front passenger seat. Seeing how uneasy she looked, she snorted and said, "Useless. Young Master He is already single again. He has no engagement, no girlfriend, and no wife. Wife, you've liked him for so many years. What are you hesitating for? Hurry up." Xie Qingying felt a little dry. She licked her lips and said shyly, "How did you know?" "Know what? You have a crush on him?" Her best friend made a "I can't stand it" expression. "Sister, I've been your best friend for 20 years since you were young. Others can't tell but I can tell. Is it that obvious?" Xie Qingying was nervous. "I don't want to end up not even being friends." No, it's not very obvious." Her best friend smiled and comforted her. "I told you only I can tell. How can others tell? Besides, although you have a crush on him, you haven't done a single thing. You haven't even said a word to him. But he doesn't seem to have a good impression of me." Xie Qingying sighed and pounded the steering wheel with her hand. "I was blinded by greed today. No wonder the ancients said that lust is beyond the heavens. Good impressions can be cultivated." Her best friend pointed at her and laughed strangely. "There are many kinds of feelings. If you can't make him fall in love at first sight, then let him fall in love after a long time." She said the word "fall in love" very loudly. Xie Qingying, she blushed and her eyes flickered. She didn't reply. Her best friend sneakily poked her arm and said meaningfully, "Really? falling in love after a long time is more worth it than anything else. Even if we don't fall in love in the end, we'll still be able to enjoy it, right? She then reminded her, let me tell you, young master, he is an elite stock among the premium stocks. Let's not talk about his family background. He's so handsome and he's especially sexually attractive to women. You can shut up. Xie Qingying finally couldn't take it anymore. She rolled her eyes at her best friend. If you miss him so much, do it yourself. Why are you encouraging me? Diske, do you think I don't want to? But I don't like him. Her best friend shrugged and said mischievously, he's too tall for me. He's a real flower on a high mountain. I'll just watch from afar. But I support you to play with him. Get lost. If you say another word, I'll throw you out of the car. Xie Qingying couldn't take it anymore. Her face turned red. Even if we're close, we'll still fall out. Seeing that Xie Qingying was anxious, her best friend covered her mouth with her hand and said with a smile, all right, I was just saying it casually. I was just joking. Don't throw me out of the car. We're on the highway and today is New Year's Day. I don't want to make big news in the new year. Xie Qingying snorted. It's good that you know. Don't say such things in the future. If you say another word, we really won't be friends anymore. Her best friend became serious and said, are you serious? Xie Qingying gripped the steering wheel tightly, and the veins on the back of her hand popped out. She said distractedly, I haven't thought about it yet. Let me think about it again. Yes, you have to think about it. Her best friend sighed. Although I came up with a lot of bad ideas just now, I still have to warn you. They say that it's easy for a woman to pursue a man, but in fact, men are more ruthless than women. If they don't love you, they don't love you. Even if they sleep with you, they just treat you as a sex toy. When you meet a woman who truly loves you in the future, you'll become cannon fodder. Xie Qingying's heart sank and she said stubbornly, young master, he isn't that kind of person. If he doesn't love you, he won't sleep with you. Yes, I hope so. Her best friend shrugged and wisely stopped talking. She changed the topic and talked to Xie Qingying about this year's fashion show. He Jichu followed He Qingjian's personal secretary, Old Zhou, back to the He family's home. He first went to his room to take a shower to wash away the dust and fatigue from the night. Old Zhou went to He Qingjian's study to report the situation. He said with a smile, General He, young master, he is back. Yes, where is he? He Qingjian was wearing a pair of presbyopic glasses as he focused on reading the internal reference. Did he have a good time last night? He should be fine. Old Zhou smiled mysteriously. I happened to see a big piece of news when I went there today. What big news? He Qingjian raised his head and looked at Old Zhou from above his presbyopic glasses. He said in amusement, Old Zhou, you're also keeping me in suspense. Ah. It's not that I want to keep you in suspense. Old Zhou said as he looked left and right. He leaned close to He Qingjian's ear and gossiped. I went to that house to look for young Master He today and happened to see young Master He kissing Prime Minister Xie Beichen's niece, Xie Qingying. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1620, Shower of Spring Sunshine. Remind everyone of the monthly votes and recommendation votes. There was a second update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1632. Really? He Qingjian's eyes lit up and he perked up. Tell me. Are they really kissing? How can it be fake? I saw it with my own eyes. If you don't believe me, you can ask young Master He. Old Zhou knew what General He was thinking. His only son's marriage had always been a thorn in General He's side. If He Jichu could really find a new lover, Old Zhou would sincerely wish them well. But if you really ask, young Master He will definitely know that I was the snitch, Old Zhou said embarrassedly. He Qingjian was amused by him and laughed out loud. His mood improved a lot. He pointed at him and said, aren't you the snitch? Seeing how happy He Qingjian was, Old Zhou was even more certain that he had done the right thing. After He Jichu finished showering, he changed his clothes and went to He Qingjian's study. He saw Old Zhou coming out with a smile on his face. He looked like he was in a good mood. He couldn't help glancing at him and didn't say anything. He pushed the door open and went in. He closed the door behind him, walked around the screen, and walked to the small cubicle where He Qingjian was working. He sat down leisurely in front of his desk and asked calmly, what happened? He Qingjian took off his reading glasses and said with a smile, something big happened. How can you still laugh? Even if it's a big deal, it shouldn't be a big deal for our country, He Jichu said calmly. Otherwise, you would be frowning. He Qingjian laughed so hard that tears came out of his eyes. You child, you're really sharp when you're sharp. Yes, something big happened, but it's not a big deal for our country. He took out a secret internal reference and placed it in front of Hijichu. He said with a serious expression, "Our people just received news from New York. The head of the Moscow Municipal Committee of the Soviet Union's capital, Yi Lisin, and the chairman of the Soviet Youth Affairs Standing Committee, Gorbachev, were assassinated in New York's Times Square during the New Year's countdown." Hijichu was stunned. He hadn't slept all night and had drunk too much red wine. He hadn't fully recovered yet. After hearing He Qingjian's words, he picked up the internal reference after a while. This internal reference was written in great detail. There were local news reports, internal intelligence that they had obtained, and an analysis of the intelligence that was compared between the two. Hijichu frowned after reading it and said, "The news said that he was hit by a stray bullet. Judging from the situation at that time, it was also aimed at the President of the United States." He Qingjian nodded and said seriously, "That's the strange part. From the news reports and the live video, it did seem like someone was trying to assassinate the US president. These two officials from the Soviet Union were just unlucky to be caught in the crossfire. However, we have a very secretive intelligence agent who obtained top-secret information from an insider of the CIA. He said that the two of them were actually assassinated, and the chaos last night was directed at the two of them. As for the President of the United States, it was just a cover at that time." As He Qingjian spoke, he took out an even more confidential document bag and placed it in front of Hijichu. "And this? Look, the ace of the Far East also appeared in New York's Times Square that night. He appeared in New York as a diplomat, but we knew who he really was. He went to New York to protect these two officials, but he was also injured. It shows how powerful the person who wants to assassinate them is." Hijichu remained silent. He opened the document bag and took out the top-secret document inside to look at it again. There were only a few photos in this top-secret document. They were all taken after the ambulance arrived in New York's Times Square. The KGB's ace of the Far East, Peter Huoxiaoheng, sat in the ambulance with a cold face. He covered his arm with one hand and his hand was covered in blood. Who was the person who injured him? Hijichu was puzzled. Could it be the CIA? Why did they assassinate these two Soviet officials? Hijichu looked at the names of the two officials again and suddenly blinked. A thought flashed through his mind. However, he quickly shook his head and felt that it shouldn't be like this. Did the Soviet Union get the news? How did Putin, the leader of the Soviet Union, react? Hijichu asked. He Qingjian clasped his hands and placed them on the desk. His gaze was solemn. Putin should have received the news by now. We still don't know how he will react. The relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union is now in jeopardy. Not long after, the phone on He Qingjian's desk rang. He picked up the phone and listened for a while. The expression on his face became even more serious. After putting down the phone, He Qingjian said, "The Soviet Union already knows. They seem to have also received information from the CIA. They insist that their two national officials were assassinated by the CIA in New York. They want the United States to hand over the murderer, or they will close the U.S. Embassy in the Soviet Union and expel their diplomats." The relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union had been bad before, which directly led to a period of Cold War. However, after Putin came to power, the relationship between the two countries improved, and they had normal diplomatic exchanges. However, this time, a national official of the Soviet Union had died in New York, and it wasn't an ordinary murder. According to the Soviet Union, it was a political murder in the United States. The relationship between the two countries was about to fall into dire straits again. Hijichu's fingers tapped lightly on the desk. After a while, he said, "Let's wait and see about this for the time being. Don't get involved in either side. Let our people in the United States stand by and don't ask for any more information. If they were too active during the storm, they would be shot at. It was just like hype marketing. Appropriate hype marketing could increase one's net worth, but if it went too far, it would backfire." He Qingjian nodded. "That's what I think too. You'll have to take over these things in the future. This time you can give them the order." Hijichu responded and stood up. "I'll go prepare now." He Qingjian waved at him and said with a smile, "There's no rush. They haven't received the order yet, so they won't act rashly. Come, tell me about your New Year's party yesterday. How was it? Is there anything you want to tell me?" Hijichu understood that old Joe, the loudmouth, was talking nonsense again. "Dad, what do you want to ask? Don't beat around the bush." Hijichu felt that he couldn't look at him. "There's nothing between me and Xie Qingying. It's just a friendly gesture between friends." "Is that so?" He Qingjian lowered his head in embarrassment. He was also a little disappointed. I thought you were close to something good? He Jichu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dad, even if there's something between Xie Qingying and me, it's still very far from close to something good. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I'll find someone to marry. Just wait to hold your grandchildren. He Qingjian raised his head in surprise and shouted, Don't lie to me. I'll take it seriously. Okay, He Jichu said briefly. I will. You can focus on work now. I haven't been home for the past few years and your health hasn't been good. I see that a lot of people have entered these departments but I'm not familiar with them. He Qingjian quickly nodded and said, Don't worry, I'm not at the point where I can't move yet. I'll get to the bottom of these people and hand this matter over to you. He Jichu's expression relaxed slightly. Then I'll go out first. The new year had arrived so he should focus all his energy on work. Gunyanji hadn't left her house for the past 2 days. She stayed at home to track the progress of the investigation into the shooting and assassination that had happened in New York's Times Square during the countdown to New Year's Eve. The domestic television stations also sent a news team to New York to follow up on it every day. Soon, the whole country knew that 2 Soviet officials who had come to attend the New Year's Eve shooting and assassination in the United States had died. The leader of the Soviet Union, Putin, was furious. He claimed that the CIA had assassinated them and demanded that the United States hand over the murderer. Otherwise, the U.S. embassy in the Soviet Union would be closed and the American diplomats would be expelled. Gunyanji looked at the names of the 2 dead officials, Yeltsin and Gorbachev. She felt an indescribable strangeness in her heart. However, she didn't say anything. She silently collected the information and stored it on her computer. She didn't call the Ace of the Far East because she didn't know what his current situation was like. When he was on a mission, no one could disturb him for personal matters. Gunyanji knew this very well. Although she wanted to confirm if this person was her Major General Hua, she still tried her best to control her emotions. If that person was really her Major General Hua, he had risked his life to come here and couldn't even acknowledge her in front of her. It was obvious how dangerous his situation was. How could she put him in danger for her own momentary pleasure? Gunyanji also knew that if this person was really Major General Hua from the other side, he chose not to tell her the truth because he didn't think she could keep it a secret. It wasn't that he didn't trust her but that she couldn't control her emotions. In the eyes of someone with ulterior motives, they would naturally make the connection and discover the fake Peter's true identity. Their job was like walking on a thin steel cable hanging from a cliff. The slightest carelessness would result in their bodies being crushed. Gunyanji would rather die than let Hua Xiaoheng be in any danger, especially not because of her. If Hua Xiaoheng was really exposed and died because of her, Gunyanji felt that she would definitely go crazy. So before he came back, she had to mentally prepare herself. Who wasn't a drama queen? Gunyanji curled her lips into a smile. She wouldn't show it in front of others, but what about behind their backs? Mr. Peter Hua, just you wait. I'll see how long you can hold it in. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1621, Let's see how long you can hold it in. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1633. The Ace of the Far East, who was far away in New York, was in the middle of serious negotiations with the U.S. government. A small piece of flesh had also been grazed off his left arm by a stray bullet. Although it wasn't particularly serious, he knew that he had been in a very dangerous situation this time when he thought about how the bullet had penetrated the thick Soviet-style military coat. His left hand was wrapped in a snow-white bandage and hung around his neck. Wearing a Soviet-style military coat, he stood in front of the morning hall set up by the Soviet Consulate General in New York and said sternly to the visiting U.S. Foreign Ministry officials, "You must hand over the murderer and the bodies of our 2 chiefs. They are Soviets and loyal soldiers of our party and country. They should be buried in our Revolutionary Martyrs Cemetery in Moscow." The U.S. diplomat smiled awkwardly and politely and said, "Mr. Peter, there's something fishy about this. Please believe us, we have no reason to assassinate them." "Why should we believe you?" The coldness on the Ace of the Far East's face could almost freeze people to death. His eyes were sharp and unruly, full of mockery and disdain. "With your fickle Twitter president? Or with the CIA's notorious reputation in the world? Mr. Peter, we understand your feelings, but please don't insult our president." The U.S. diplomat couldn't take it anymore. Didn't they want face? But what could they do when there was a president who tweeted every day and deleted his last tweet at the drop of a hat? They couldn't even refute Deputy Chief Counsel Peter's words. Because if they denied it, they believed that the other party could take out a screenshot and slap them in the face at any moment. The ace of the Far East sneered and put his hands behind his back. What's wrong? I just said one sentence and you can't take it anymore? Your president's reputation is more important than the lives of our chiefs, isn't it? But that's for you. And for us, the lives of our own people are much more important than the reputation of your president. The ace of the Far East stretched out his uninjured right hand and said with a straight face, if there's nothing else to say, please go back. Among the visiting U.S. Foreign Ministry officials, there was a diplomat who had once been a visiting professor at Harvard's Kennedy School of Politics. He was very old and his hair was silver and shiny, but his face was rosy and natural, and he was hale and hearty. But now his face was full of sorrow. He walked up to the ace of the Far East and said very sincerely, Mr. Peter, what we said is true. Mr. Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev were my best students, and they were determined to introduce the advanced American system to the Soviet Union. This time we've met with them many times. It's all for Mr. Platini. Since they don't believe us, we don't have to waste our saliva. A middle-sized U.S. diplomat suddenly interrupted the former visiting professor of Harvard University. We should go. Mr. Platini, who was very old, stopped talking guiltily and said awkwardly, actually, their passing is a greater loss to us than to you. What do you mean? They are state officials of the Soviet Union. How can you say that their deaths are a bigger loss to you? The ace of the Far East obviously caught the loophole in the former guest professor's words and asked without delay, what do you mean? Could it be that what they do for the U.S. is more important than what they do for the Soviet Union? The meaning behind his words was deep. It was as if he was asking if these two Soviet Union officials had committed treason. Mr. Peter, don't talk nonsense. The middle-sized diplomat who had just stopped Professor Platini clearly understood the meaning behind the ace of the Far East's words. His face darkened and his brows furrowed. He tried his best to maintain his dignity and said, I understand how you feel. The death of Mr. Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev is definitely a major loss to you, and it is also a major loss to world peace. I don't understand what you're saying. The ace of the Far East stared at the middle-sized American diplomat aggressively. If he was not mistaken, this person's true identity should be an agent of the CIA. Because of his vigilance and habits, he gave him a very familiar feeling. It was the subconscious vigilance of a peer meeting a peer. Of course, the ace of the Far East disguise was even stronger. He did not arouse any vigilance from his American colleague. He only treated him as a diplomat sent by the Soviet Union. According to the information obtained by the CIA, the grandmother of this ace of the Far East, Mr. Peter Huishauheng, was once a Soviet diplomat. The Soviet diplomatic system was a hereditary succession system, not a merit-based recruitment. Therefore, these Americans did not take the beautiful Deputy Chief Counsel Peter seriously at all. The American diplomat said calmly, because of their deaths, your top leader, Mr. Pushin, has threatened to expel our diplomats, and is even willing to fight with us. That's why I said that their deaths are a great loss to world peace. The ace of the Far East sneered, raised his head and said, hand over our chief's body and send us back to Moscow with a national gift in front of the world. I'll believe that this matter has nothing to do with your government. Otherwise, whether it's war or peace, it's up to me. The middle-sized American diplomat looked at the ace of the Far East with almost disdain. He thought to himself that this was really a good-for-nothing. What was the use of only asking for a national gift? Besides, was it necessary for them to keep the bodies of two Soviet officials? They were indeed of great value when they were alive, but now that they were dead, all their value had returned to zero. If they kept the bodies and angered Pushin, the Soviet leader, they might really launch a missile. A fighting nation was just that valiant. They were indifferent to life and death, and if they were unhappy, they would fight. The Americans weren't so rash. Therefore, he sighed and said, don't worry, I'll go back and negotiate with the people at the police station now. I'll be sure to return the bodies of your two chiefs as soon as possible. Also, I'll ask the president about sending them back with a national gift. The ace of the Far East snorted arrogantly and said, you don't need to send our chiefs back home with a national gift. I'll stay here and not leave. A look of disdain flashed across the eyes of the middle-sized American diplomat. However, Peter's next words defeated him completely. I still have to tweet every day and confront your president head-on. The American officials weren't afraid of anything now. They were only afraid that the president would argue with someone on Twitter. Of course, ordinary people wouldn't dare to argue with the president of the United States, but those who dared to argue with the president of the United States weren't ordinary people. Mr. Peter, please calm down. We'll arrange a national gift right away. At this time, the American diplomats no longer had any bargaining chips to negotiate with the Soviet diplomats. No matter what, the Americans had already lost 2 of their chiefs. What bargaining chips could they use to negotiate with the Soviets? Now the whole world was blaming the Americans for their negligence, which had caused the deaths of 2 Soviet state-level officials in a foreign country. Under the insistence of the ace of the Far East, the U.S. government couldn't wait to chase them away. A few days later they left New York and returned to Moscow. It was a snowy day. The special plane from the Soviet Union slowly landed at New York Airport. The honor guard and military band sent by the U.S. government played the Soviet national anthem in the heavy snow. The President of the United States personally brought his own officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the airport and sent their group of people, including the coffins of the 2 chiefs, onto the plane. Only the Soviet plane could take off on time amidst the flying snowflakes. They flew across the ocean and finally returned to Moscow after more than 10 hours. Pushkin held a grand state funeral for the 2 dead officials here. The Wuxia Empire television station also broadcast the state funeral live. Gunyenji saw the coffins of the 2 officials being buried under the flag of a sickle and an axe on the television. She felt an indescribable sense of absurdity. No matter how hard she watched on the television, she didn't see Deputy Chief Counsel Peter, who was said to have returned home with the plane. Not a single scene. Gunyenji was a little impatient. In order to divert her attention, she stayed at home and flipped through the internal files of the Qin Corporation's private hospital that Lu Jin had downloaded for her. Unfortunately, less than 1/10 of it had been downloaded. There weren't many things. And from the looks of it, there was nothing really noteworthy. It had to be said that the Qin Corporation's private hospital had developed from a small private clinic to a large private hospital chain group that spread all over the world in the past few decades. Its internal management was very formal and rigorous. She didn't find any illegal activities. The only drawback seemed to be that it was too expensive. But expensive things varied from person to person. They opened a private hospital, not a charity. Of course, their purpose was to make profits. There was no forced buying or selling. It was just that Jiang Taigong was fishing, and those who were willing took the bait. So this really couldn't be said to be its drawback. It could only be said that its operators were very business-minded. Not only did they open a private hospital to treat patients and save people, but they also made huge profits from it. Actually, from this perspective, the Qin Corporation's private hospital and the General Society had a win-win relationship. Gunyenji concentrated on studying the information of the Qin Corporation's private hospital for more than 10 days, but found nothing. After dinner that night, Gunyenji didn't want to look at the information anymore. She hugged her panda pillow and stayed in the living room to watch TV. Lu Jin saw that she didn't go to the study to study the information after dinner like she had done the previous 2 days. He sat beside her curiously and asked, "Why didn't you go to the study? Have you finished studying the information?" "There's still a little left, but from what I've seen, the Qin Corporation's private hospital is a very formal enterprise. Its management is also very high-end, its accounts are clear and it abides by the law. I can't find any loopholes." Gunyenji punched the panda pillow in her arms in frustration. Lu Jin smiled. "There's no hurry. This is only 1/10." Lu Yuan walked over with a plate of fruit and placed it on the coffee table in front of Gunyenji. He smiled and said, "That's right. Such a large listed company has been in business for decades and is well known both at home and abroad. Even if there were loopholes, how could you find them in 2 days? If there were such loopholes, they would have been killed in the stock market a long time ago. The capital market was cruel. If one was the slightest bit careless, they would be killed in the stock market. Therefore, profit-making companies that had existed in the stock market for decades had very strict internal management. If they weren't strict, they would be taught a lesson by the capital, and the outcome would be as uncomfortable as having their flesh cut and bones broken." Gunyenji heaved a sigh of relief and felt better. She quickly nodded. "Thank you for your guidance, President Liu. If there's anything I don't understand about management in the future, can I ask President Liu for advice?" "I don't dare. If you have any questions we can discuss it together," Lu Yuan said with a smile. He was very magnanimous and modest. Lu Jin pursed his lips. He was a little unwilling, but he said helplessly, "Boss Liu, you can't hide anything. You have to answer Nyenji honestly if she asks you anything. You can't play tricks on her and you can't avoid the important and fool her." Lu Yuan stopped smiling and lowered his head to take a sip of the pu or tea he had brewed. He said lightly, "In your heart, am I such a person? Of course. You're a proper profiteer. Otherwise, how could our company make so much money? Lu Jin was elated and in a good mood again. He was indeed not good at corporate management. He had completely relied on Lu Yuan's management skills to run their small online security company so well that it had developed into a large listed company in just over a decade. Gunyanji didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She shook her head. Dad, are you praising President Lu or insulting him? How can you say that? Fortunately, you and President Lu have been friends for more than a decade. Otherwise, if it were anyone else, they would have immediately fallen out. Lu Yuan couldn't help laughing. He pointed at Gunyanji. You're still speaking up for your father. If that's the case, wouldn't I be too embarrassed to fall out with him? How could that be? Gunyanji smiled like a flower. President Lu is broad-minded. If he was really angry, he would have broken off ties with my father more than a decade ago. How could he still be a good friend and business partner? How many people could go through thick and thin together, but they couldn't go through thick and thin together? How many people believed in changing wives for the rich and changing friends for the rich? After so many years of ups and downs, the fact that they were still business partners and close friends had already proved their unbreakable friendship. Lu Jin nodded repeatedly. Boss Lu doesn't have any other benefits, but he does have a good temper. He doesn't get angry no matter what, and he doesn't fall out with anyone. Lu Yuan was so annoyed by the father and daughter that he had no choice but to point at them a few times with his finger. He smiled and said, You two have said all the good and bad things. I'm all alone, so I can't beat the two of you together. When Gunyanji heard this, her heart skipped a beat. Her dark jade-like eyes darted around. She pretended to be calm and asked tentatively, Alone? No way. President Lu, you're so outstanding. I don't believe you don't have a confidant. Lu Yuan raised his head and laughed, revealing his snow-white teeth and the exquisite curve of his jaw. Although he was old, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes didn't look old. Instead, they had a different kind of charm. Confidant? I'm already so old, how could there be any woman who wants me? Yanji, you think too highly of me. Uncle, you must be joking. You're in the prime of your life. I believe that as long as you want, the number of high-quality beauties who are willing to live with you can line up from the second ring to the third ring of the imperial capital. Only from the second ring to the third ring? Yanji, in your eyes, is Boss Lu only that charming? Lu Jin joined in the fun with a smile. He used a small fork to fork a piece of golden cantaloupe and handed it to Gunyanji. He said, Open your mouth. Gunyanji opened her mouth and bit the cantaloupe. The sweet, honey-like taste made her squint her eyes and eat contentedly. After eating, she wiped her mouth with a tissue and said with a smile, I'm talking about high-quality beauties. There aren't many of them to begin with, so all of them are only from the second ring to the third ring. As for ordinary beauties, who wants so many rotten suitors? Right, President Lu? Her last sentence was directed at Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan smiled calmly and didn't say anything. He allowed the father and daughter to tease him. After a while, he naturally changed the topic and said, It's already the 12th lunar month and it's going to be the new year in 10 days. Where do you want to go for the Lunar New Year this year? How about a trip abroad? Lu Jin quickly said, The Caribbean? We have an island over there where we can take a vacation. Gunyanji's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to agree, but she thought about what would happen if the unidentified ace of the Far East came looking for her if she went abroad. She hugged her panda pillow and smiled tenderly. It's the new year, so don't go out. It's our first lunar year, so it's better to be more traditional. Lu Jin nodded repeatedly. Okay. Just be more traditional. He turned to look at Lu Yuan and said, Boss Lu, stew another Buddha jumps over the wall, for the new year? Gunyanji giggled. As she bent down, she heard her phone ring. She picked it up and saw that it was the number of the ace of the Far East. She gave him a note, the king of the drama kings. This was today's main chapter. Chapter 1622, the king of dramatists. Not at night. He still had to work overtime today. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1634. Gunyanji looked at the number on her phone. For a moment, she felt as if it was a lifetime ago. She held her phone and silently rubbed the number twice before slowly picking it up. She got up and walked to her bedroom. Hello? Who is this? Gunyanji's voice was sweeter and more alluring than usual. It was like a lychee that had been rolled in honey. It was sweet and had a refreshing fragrance. The person on the other end of the phone didn't seem surprised. He laughed in a low voice. Yes, it's me, Lawyer Gu. How are you? Gunyanji continued to play dumb. Huh? Who are you? If you don't tell me your name, I'm hanging up. She deliberately muttered to herself, These men are so annoying. They call me all day long. It's useless even if I block them. They keep changing their numbers. The person on the other end was a little surprised. He frowned and asked, "Many men call you to harass you?" "Yes." Gunyenji walked into her bedroom and quietly closed the door. She held back her laughter and complained, "I don't want people to say I'm a flirt, but no matter what I say, those people won't listen. Forget it, why am I telling you this to a stranger? I'm hanging up." She pretended to hang up the phone. The person on the other end finally realized that Gunyenji was deliberately giving him a taste of his own medicine. His voice deepened and he said unhappily, "Lawyer Gu, are you playing this game with me?" "Young master," he said, "that you have an excellent memory. Not only do you have a photographic memory but you also have a photographic memory. How could you not recognize my voice? Stop playing dumb." Gunyenji curled the corners of her lips. She thought to herself, "Young master, he really thinks you're the ace of the Far East. He must be stupid to tell you about me." This was another piece of evidence that proved that this ace of the Far East, Peter, was cheating. Pretend, continue pretending. Gunyenji chuckled and hung up the phone without hesitation. On the other end of the phone, the ace of the Far East looked down at his phone. An extremely faint smile appeared on his lips and disappeared in a flash. When he looked up, his face was already frosty. He quickly dialed the number again. This time it rang for a long time. Gunyenji slowly opened the phone and said lazily, "Who are you? If you do this again, I'll block your number." The ace of the Far East composed himself and suddenly said, "If you really hated me, you wouldn't have said so much to me. You would have blocked my number without hesitation." Gunyenji perked up. Damn it. He knew her too well. She felt that all the artistic cells in her body had been awakened when she was acting with the man who had shaped her outlook on life. Gunyenji rolled her eyes, and her voice dropped an octave as she muttered, "I know you're Peter and I can't bear to hate you. You look exactly like the man I love most. When I see you, I see him." The ace of the Far East didn't even bat an eyelid. He let out a low laugh and blurted out a string of romantic words, "You can treat me as the person you love the most. You saved my life, so I'm yours for the rest of my life. I can't marry anyone else." When Gunyenji heard the ace of the Far East's words, she was both excited and excited. Her plump lips curved into a cute smile. It was as if she was bathing in the early spring sun. The breeze was blowing, and the air was filled with the fragrance of love. If this person wasn't her Major General Hua, Gunyenji would have been very disgusted by this man's casual sweet words. But she was now more and more certain that the person on the other side was her Major General Hua. And given Major General Hua's status on the other side, he would never say such words. So when she heard these words now, it was as if she had deposited a huge amount of money in the bank. She had thought that she would only be able to withdraw the interest after 20 years, but now she could withdraw it in advance. Both her body and heart were in a state of extreme satisfaction. But in this kind of happiness that almost made her dizzy, she still had a trace of rationality that told her that she couldn't let the person on the other side know that she had seen through his disguise. Gunyenji covered the microphone on her phone and took a few deep breaths. She said aloofly, "Then I'm sorry. Although you look exactly like him, I know very well that you're not him." "Are you deliberately trying to fool me by saying that?" The ace of the Far East seemed to be angry. "I've never seen anyone who looks exactly like me, and I'm sure I don't have a twin brother." Gunyenji resisted the temptation and shrugged. She said firmly, "It's impossible for me to treat you as the person I love the most. It's impossible for me in this lifetime. But I can't see him, so sometimes I admire you as him. I hope you don't misunderstand. I won't play the game of being a substitute lover. It's not fair to you or me." She hung up the phone resolutely and blocked the ace of the Far East's phone number. On the other side of the phone, the ace of the Far East was in the first-class cabin of the plane from Moscow to the imperial capital of the Wuxia Empire. He was stunned when he saw the other party hang up the phone again. When he tried to call again, the line was always busy. He had really blocked his number. He stared at the phone for a while and put it away as if nothing had happened. He would arrive in the imperial capital in a few hours. Anyway, he would be able to see him then. It didn't matter if he called or not. Gunyenji came out of the bedroom after the call. Lu Yuan, who was watching TV attentively in the living room, immediately turned around and looked at her thoughtfully. He smiled and asked, "Huh? Look at your love-struck face. You look like a little girl who just finished a phone call with her boyfriend." Lu Jin quickly turned around and asked curiously, "Huh? Who called you just now?" Gunyenji touched her face and said with a smile, "I don't have a boyfriend. Uncle Lu, don't spout nonsense. It was Deputy Chief Counsel Peter from the Soviet Union just now. I've already blocked his number. What kind of words are you saying? Makes me blush. It's him? Lu Yuan's eyes flashed and he sat up straight. He was obviously more concerned than before. Isn't he in Moscow? Gu Nianji, holy sh*t. She had been so busy arguing with the ace of the Far East that she forgot to ask where he was. I think so. I didn't ask. Gu Nianji pretended to be indifferent. She walked back to the living room and sat down. She bent down to pick up the plate of cantaloupe from the coffee table and held it in her arms to eat. After eating the cantaloupe, Gu Nianji took out her phone and scrolled through Weibo. However, she had been feeling uneasy. There were several times when she almost couldn't help but release the ace of the Far East's phone number from the blacklist. However, if she really released it, wouldn't she be making a fool of herself if the other party made a bad association? Therefore, Gu Nianji could only force herself to do something else to divert her attention. Major General Huo was such a patient person. If she relaxed a little, he would be able to see through her. After constantly mentally preparing herself, Gu Nianji composed herself and went to the study to continue studying the dirt on the Qin Corporation's private hospital. As soon as she got into work, she quickly put aside those distracting thoughts. He busied himself until midnight. Lu Jin knocked on the door several times before Gu Nianji reluctantly put down her work. She smiled and said, "I'm actually not sleepy at all." Even if you're not sleepy, you have to sleep well. Young people don't sleep. It's not good for their skin. Lu Jin warned her with a stern face. He was more concerned about his daughter's health than anything else. He only had one daughter in his life. He didn't want her to be famous. He only wanted her to be healthy and live to an old age. Gu Nianji turned off the computer and smiled obsequiously. Okay, I'll go take a shower right away. She got up with her phone and left the study with Lu Jin. Lu Jin saw that she was so concerned about the Qin Corporation's private group, so he said, "I'll hack into their system again and download more things when it's almost the new year." During the new year? Gu Nianji held Lu Jin's arm and said with a smile, "Is it because the management there is the most lax during the new year?" Smart. Lu Jin tapped the tip of her delicate nose and walked her to the bedroom door. He rubbed her head and said dotingly, "Go to sleep. We'll look at the information tomorrow." Gu Nianji nodded obediently. Just as she was about to enter her bedroom, she suddenly heard Lu Jin's phone ring. It was so late. Who was calling him? Gu Nianji looked at Lu Jin curiously. "Dad? Your phone." Lu Jin took out his phone and looked at it. It was an unfamiliar number. He hesitated and said, "Maybe it was the wrong number." Gu Nianji looked at it. It was the number of the ace of the Far East, the king of drama. Did he call Lu Jin instead because he couldn't get through to her? Gu Nianji rolled her eyes and said, "Answer it. It's so late. Maybe there's something important?" Lu Jin frowned and picked up the phone for Gu Nianji's sake. The person on the other end immediately said, "Is this Uncle Lu?" "I'm Peter. I just came back from Moscow and brought some gifts for Lawyer Gu and Uncle Lu. I'm at the reception desk at the entrance of your apartment building right now. Can you ask them to let me in?" Lu Jin pulled a long face and said unhappily, "It's so late. Let's talk tomorrow." He was about to hang up when the ace of the Far East said, "I offended Lawyer Gu today and want to apologize to her in person. I can't wait until tomorrow to apologize. That would be too perfunctory. I hope Uncle Lu will give me this chance." He added, "I brought the best black pork and caviar in Moscow." Lu Jin was a little hungry when he said that. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed and she said slowly, "You want to apologize in person? Sure, come up and make supper for me and my dad and I'll forgive you." This was the first update of the day, chapter 1623, I'm yours for the rest of my life. There would be a second update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1635. When the ace of the Far East heard Gu Nianji's words, he immediately smiled bitterly and said, "I told you I don't know how to cook. Aren't you making things difficult for me? What do I need you for if you don't know how to cook? You even said you have to apologize sincerely. I think it's better if you learn right away." Lu Jin waved his hand unhappily, not caring if Deputy Chief Counsel Peter could see him. "Alright, it's late. You should go. Don't stand here and make a fool of yourself." The ace of the Far East paused for a moment and quickly said, "Then I'll wait here. If anyone asks me later, I'll say that I'm here to ask Lawyer Gu to be my lawyer." "What lawyer? What the hell are you doing?" Lu Jin could tell that there was a hidden meaning in the ace of the Far East's words and asked suspiciously, "Hurry up and go. Don't get us into trouble." Gu Nianji was dumbfounded. Although she felt that the ace of the Far East was most likely Major General Hua, she was still amazed by how unscrupulous he was. In order to enter her house, he had really thought of everything. What Lu Jin was most afraid of now was too much exposure. If Deputy Chief Counsel Peter said that if someone asked him, he would most likely give in. The ace of the Far East simply opened the video call invitation on his phone. After Lu Jin accepted, a tall man in a Soviet military uniform appeared on his phone. He stood tall and straight like a pine tree at the entrance of their apartment complex. Snowflakes fluttered in the night sky. The bright light of the street lamp reflected the falling snow and fell on his exquisite face, making his face look like it was made of porcelain jade and unreal. That face was so handsome that it was flawless, like a work of art carefully carved by the creator. However, Gu Nianji didn't dare to walk in front of the camera on Lu Jin's phone to look at him, because she was worried that she wouldn't be able to control her gaze and expose herself. Therefore, the handsome face of the ace of the Far East looked no different from that of a passerby in Lu Jin's eyes. He nodded and said rudely, "If you can make supper, then hurry up. We don't have to look for Boss Lu. If you can't make it, then go back. It's snowing outside, so I won't keep you." He then cut off the video call and turned off his phone. Gu Nianji suddenly looked up at Lu Jin and said in surprise, "It's snowing outside?" "Yeah." As Lu Jin spoke, he walked into Gu Nianji's bedroom and pulled open a corner of the curtains. He said, "Look, it's snowing quite heavily. He could enjoy the snow tomorrow. We should eat roasted venison and admire the snow. I'll tell Boss Lu to prepare the ingredients and tools for the roast." Lu Jin patted Gu Nianji's shoulder excitedly. "Go to bed early." Realizing that it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, he hurriedly said, "It's not early anymore. If you don't sleep now, it'll be daybreak." She jumped down from the windowsill and hurriedly changed her clothes. She went to the bathroom to brush her hair and wash her face, then put on a light layer of lip gloss. When she came out, she grabbed a cashmere coat and put it on. Then she took an umbrella and ran out of the door. After getting off the elevator, she left the lobby of the apartment building with an umbrella. The snow outside had already gotten heavier. It was about the same as the snow she had seen at the station that night. There wasn't much snow on the road, but it was still creaking and a little slippery. In order to make herself appear more natural, she deliberately walked very slowly, one step at a time. She thought that if he had already left by the time she walked over like this, it would naturally be for the best, and she wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. But if she walked over slowly like this, he would still be waiting at the door and she would have enough time to adjust her mentality. From her apartment building to the entrance of the apartment complex. Under normal circumstances, it would take more than 10 minutes to walk. It was the middle of the night and it was still snowing heavily. It took Gu Nianji almost half an hour to walk to the door. The ace of the Far East was still standing at the entrance of the apartment complex. He had his hands in the pockets of his Soviet military uniform coat and leaned against a big tree at the entrance of the complex. His eyes were calm as he looked ahead. At that moment, he suddenly saw a tall woman holding a light blue umbrella walk out of the heavy snow under the dark sky. Like a lamp, it lit up the dark night. Everything around him quickly receded, and only she existed in his field of vision. Gu Nianji walked up to him and said lightly, "It's snowing. I'll lend you this umbrella." The ace of the Far East looked at her quietly for a while, and his calm face gradually rippled. He frivolously reached out to hold her chin, and his voice was as soft as a lover's whisper. "And you still say you're not tempted?" This was today's second update, chapter 1624, and you still say you're not tempted. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1636. Gu Nianji's chin followed the ace of the Far East gentle gesture and her jet-black eyes glanced at him from between her long eyelashes that were as black as a crow's wing. She then looked down at the travel bag the ace of the Far East had placed at his feet and slapped his hand away. She said calmly, "Narcissism is a disease. It has to be treated. Actually, I'm here to get the black pork and caviar." As she spoke, Gu Nianji took a step back and handed him the umbrella in her hand. She smiled sweetly and said, "Here, thank you for bringing us gifts from so far away. This umbrella is our way of thanking you." The ace of the Far East raised an eyebrow and retracted his hand. He leaned against the tree behind him and chuckled. He smiled lazily and said, "Really? My black pork and caviar were supposed to be free, but in the end, Lawyer Gu even gave me an umbrella. I'm the one who earned it." The clear baritone voice that used to be cold and aloof actually sounded a little warm in the silent snowy night. Gunyanji looked up at him. The eyes that were once so clear that one could see the bottom had now become a deep pool, burying all the emotions and worries in the deep pool. Yes, it's good that you earned it. I never owe anyone a favor. Gunyanji still reached out and handed the umbrella over. The back of her hand was fair and delicate. Against the black handle of the umbrella, there was a distinct black and white temptation. The ace of the Far East's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He also reached out his hand and held the handle of the umbrella with Gunyanji's hand. Gunyanji's small hand suddenly felt his palm burning hot in the palm of his big hand. Gunyanji felt it and felt even more certain, but her face showed an impatient expression. She struggled in his palm and scolded him in a low voice, "Let go of me." The ace of the Far East let go of his hand and bent down to pick up the travel bag. He said, "It's a little heavy. I'll take it to the elevator and then I'll leave." Gunyanji took the opportunity when he bent over to quickly make a face. When he straightened up, Gunyanji said with a straight face, "No need, I can take it myself." As she spoke, she took a step forward to take the travel bag from the ace of the Far East. "You really want to take it?" The ace of the Far East looked at her in amusement. "Why don't you try?" He placed the travel bag on the ground and gestured for Gunyanji to carry it herself. Gunyanji snorted and bent down to pick up the travel bag. He nearly couldn't straighten his back. She gritted her teeth and tried again with both hands, but it still didn't work. She couldn't lift it at all. It was as heavy as a bag full of rocks. Gunyanji even had the urge to open the bag to see what was inside. At this moment, the ace of the Far East's clear and pleasant low laughter came from above. He bent down and wrapped his arm around Gunyanji's slender waist to pick up the duffel bag with one hand. He took the umbrella from Gunyanji with his other hand and leaned over to shield her from the wind and snow. "I'll take you back." Seeing Gunyanji's hesitation, the ace of the Far East sighed. "All right, I'll only send you to the elevator. I won't make things difficult for you." It sounded like she was making things difficult for him. Gunyanji laughed and said, "Actually, you can come to my house as long as you promise to cook for me and my dad. I just don't understand why you won't cook." "How can I cook if I don't know how to cook? Do you think you can eat such disgusting food? Why waste food?" The ace of the Far East said as he walked with her to the apartment she lived in. It was snowing even harder, and the snow on the ground had already accumulated. When she stepped on it, half of her foot was covered. Gunyanji curled her lips and said lightly, "Only those who have eaten it can judge whether it's delicious or disgusting. I've never eaten the food you cooked, so how do you know if I can eat it? I only know how to cook instant noodles or instant dumplings. Do you really want to eat it? I'll cook it for you." The ace of the Far East was also very calm. He carried the travel bag in one hand and held an umbrella in the other as he walked steadily beside her. Half of the falling snow was blocked by the umbrella above her head, and the other half was blocked by the ace of the Far East's tall body. Gunyanji didn't have any snowflakes on her body at all. As the two of them walked on the snowy ground, they actually felt like they were playing the zither and the zither. Gunyanji smiled and chatted with him. "Didn't you go back to Moscow? Why did you suddenly come back? You saw it?" The ace of the Far East smiled bitterly. "I had no choice. I was caught on a business trip at the last minute. I didn't expect something like this to happen. 2 national leaders of the Soviet Union had been killed in the United States. This was big news that shocked the world." Gunyanji nodded. "I also saw that you seemed to be injured." She glanced at his left arm, which was holding the umbrella. "Are you okay?" The ace of the Far East shook his head nonchalantly. "It's just a small injury. I'm fine now." Gunyanji nodded and said, "You have to be careful too." The ace of the Far East paused in his steps and looked at her with a smile. "You care about me so much?" Gunyanji couldn't help rolling her eyes. "Why don't you think about it? I almost lost my life to save you. Why don't you pay attention to your safety? Then I saved you for nothing." The ace of the Far East grunted. "Okay, I got it." When Gunyanji came out, she felt that the road was very long. She walked for a full half an hour before she reached the entrance of the neighborhood. But this time, when she walked backwards, it was as if she had arrived at the elevator of her apartment building in the blink of an eye. The ace of the Far East watched her press the password and followed her into the elevator. "Gunyanji, what happened to only going to the elevator?" The ace of the Far East explained with a smile. "It's too heavy. You won't be able to carry it out even if you get to the elevator." Gunyanji really couldn't carry the bag and she didn't want to ask Lu Jin to come down to carry it at this time. She could only press the button for the floor. The elevator went straight to her floor. Soon with a ding the elevator door opened. It was her apartment. Gunyanji opened the door and was about to say, "Let's stop here." The ace of the Far East had already walked around her briskly. He carried his duffel bag in one hand and an umbrella in the other and strode into her apartment. "Gunyanji," she stood at the door and frowned. "Mr. Peter, aren't you going too far?" She had actually entered the apartment step by step. The ace of the Far East didn't seem to hear her. He put down his duffel bag and looked around. He nodded and said, "Your place is not bad." "Of course it's not bad. Why don't you see how much the rent is?" Gunyanji was very annoyed by her decline, and her expression turned cold. "All right, you can leave now. If you don't leave, I'll really call the police." "Call the police? It won't work. I have diplomatic immunity." The ace of the Far East looked at her and smiled mockingly. "Think of something else." "I don't need to think of anything else." Gunyanji pulled the door open and pointed outside. She said coldly, "Hurry up and get out or I'll call for you. My dad lives across the street." The ace of the Far East was obviously stunned. He rubbed his nose and smiled sheepishly. "That's a good move. 'Kay, I'll go." He did have diplomatic immunity, but in front of the girl's father, he didn't have any immunity. Gunyanji narrowed her eyes and watched him walk towards the door. When she was about to reach the elevator, Gunyanji suddenly remembered that he didn't bring an umbrella. She turned around and took a few quick steps. She picked up the umbrella that the ace of the Far East had put up by the door and rushed to the elevator. She said to the ace of the Far East in the elevator, "Don't forget the umbrella. It's snowing outside." The ace of the Far East looked at her with bright eyes and said, "Don't give me an umbrella. I don't want an umbrella." Giving someone an umbrella didn't have a good meaning. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1625, I Don't Want an Umbrella. Today was Monday, a reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets. I saw that the monthly ticket was 2,500. Today was the third update. The second update was at 1 p.m. and the monthly ticket was 2,500 plus updates. There was the third update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1637. Gunyanji couldn't react in time, so she retracted her hand and said with a straight face, "It's fine if you don't want it. You're the one who doesn't want it. Don't accuse me of taking advantage of you." She turned around and returned to her apartment, slamming the door shut. The ace of the Far East stood in the elevator and looked at the door that Gunyanji had just closed. He still had that cold expression on his face. This scene was fixed on the monitor of Lu Jin's apartment. Lu Jin waved his fist at the monitor and snorted. "How dare you be disrespectful to my daughter? You'll be punished by torture. Do you think your father is dead?" The corridors and elevators of the apartment on the floor where Lu Jin, Gunyanji, and Lu Yuan lived were all equipped with a newly developed surveillance system. This monitoring system was a set of mini monitors the size of a needle tip. It could perform high-performance facial recognition and monitor the elevators on their floor at the right time. Only his, Lu Yuan's, and Gunyanji's appearances had been identified and stored by the system in advance. If a fourth person enters the elevator, the surveillance system will alarm. Lu Jin was woken up by the alarm on the monitor after Deputy Chief Counsel Peter entered the elevator. He, who had already fallen asleep, got up with a grunt and pounced in front of the surveillance camera. In the end, he witnessed the entire process of Deputy Chief Counsel Peter following Gunyanji into the room. Several times he was so anxious that he wanted to rush to Gunyanji's door and scold Mr. Peter. However, he resisted the urge. Because his daughter had grown up, he had to give his daughter some autonomy. He believed that she could handle this matter by herself. After all, Gunyanji was Peter's savior. Lu Jin had a hunch that he wouldn't harm Gunyanji. However, this kind of pestering behavior gave Lu Jin a headache. Fortunately, his daughter was powerful enough. In the end, she used her father's name and successfully scared Peter away. That's right, so what if you have diplomatic immunity? As Nyenji's father, if he said he didn't like her, then he didn't like her. Did he have to choose his words carefully to avoid embarrassing her? The ace of the Far East walked out of the elevator and saw that the snow outside was indeed getting heavier. Expressionlessly, he turned up the collar of his coat and walked out into the snow. Not long after walking on the sidewalk of the apartment complex, the ace of the Far East suddenly stopped. His eyes fell on a holly tree at the edge of the sidewalk. If he was not mistaken, the streetlight shone from behind the holly tree, and he could vaguely see a figure standing behind it. The person standing behind the tree waited for a while. Seeing that he did not leave and kept looking in his direction, he chuckled and simply walked out from behind the holly tree. Deputy Chief Counsel Peter, you really care about our Nyenji. The man held a lighter in his hand and lit a cigarette in his mouth with a whoosh. The ace of the Far East looked at the person quietly and regained his cold expression. He said lightly, so it's Chief Lu. This person was Lu Yuan. He knew from the moment the ace of the Far East entered the elevator, because Lu Jin's surveillance system had also been installed in his room. It was originally just in case, so it was safer for two people to watch than one. Unlike Lu Jin, he was too embarrassed to see Gu Nianji alone with another man. Moreover, he was more interested in Deputy Chief Counsel Peter, so he waited for a while. Seeing that Gu Nianji was determined, he came out early and waited for her on the way out of the apartment complex. He hadn't thought of how to talk to him, but he hadn't expected Deputy Chief Counsel Peter to be so sensitive and notice him almost immediately. Lu Yuan was wearing a very textured charcoal gray cashmere coat. He lowered his eyes and took a puff of his cigarette. He said casually, Deputy Chief Counsel Peter really did something big in the United States this time. The ace of the Far East's face turned cold and he looked at Lu Yuan sternly. Chief Lu, I don't understand what you mean. You don't understand? Lu Yuan still didn't look up. He looked at the snow on the ground and said lightly, everyone in the world knows that your country's Yeltsin and Gorbachev were assassinated in New York this time. That's a disgrace to our country. Our country's leader, Mr. Pushin, has already lodged a solemn protest to the United States. He has closed the American embassy in the Soviet Union and expelled their diplomats. The ace of the Far East put one hand behind his back and smiled faintly. Chief Lu is very concerned about the deaths of Yeltsin and Gorbachev. The television plays it 24 hours a day. It's impossible not to care. Lu Yuan raised his head and exhaled a mouthful of white smoke, blurring his vision. He stared at the beautiful man in front of him, as if he was seeing another shockingly beautiful woman through him. The ace of the Far East snorted, obviously not believing his words. He looked up and down at Lu Yuan, who was almost as tall as him, and suddenly asked, but why does Chief Lu care about Yeltsin and Gorbachev and not others? Do these two people have any special meaning to Chief Lu? Lu Yuan's eyes, which were as deep as a cold pool, suddenly lit up. It was like the hottest blue flame in the middle of a flame, almost penetrating all the fog. Deputy Chief Counsel Peter, why do you think these two people have special meaning to me? Lu Yuan didn't answer directly. Instead he asked, I'm just a businessman. I've never been involved in politics, let alone the politics of other countries. Really? That's even stranger. The corners of the ace of the Far East's lips curled into a smile. You're just a businessman and don't care about politics. However, after you found out that the two leaders of our country, Yeltsin and Gorbachev, were killed, you blocked me on the road in the middle of the night on a snowy day and specifically asked me about these two people. President Lu, don't you think that the reason you gave is illogical? Lu Yuan took another puff of his cigarette and said nonchalantly, as I said, the news these days is too powerful. I cannot pay attention to it. I'm just curious. Deputy Chief Counsel Peter was also present at that time. With Mr. Peter's power, how could he let someone succeed? If I remember correctly, Deputy Chief Counsel Peter once admitted to us that you were from the KGB? That was when the bug he had installed on Gu Nianji was discovered. He had personally come to the place where Gu Nianji was recuperating to apologize. He had confessed that installing the bug was just his professional habit, and he had said that he was from the KGB of the Soviet Union. He had asked Lu Yuan and Lu Jin to cooperate with him to ensure Gu Nianji's safety. The smile on the ace of the Far East's face faded, and then he quickly raised a new smile. President Lu also said that you don't care about politics. In my opinion, your political sensitivity is extraordinary. You flatter me. Lu Yuan smiled faintly. It's just that I once had a dream in this area, but the dream was shattered. I could only be an honest businessman, a career with no future. If President Lu says that there's no future after building a business to such an extent, then we really don't want to live anymore. The ace of the Far East took a step forward with a half smile and got closer to Lu Yuan. He leaned forward slightly and moved in front of Lu Yuan. He lowered his voice and said something. Lu Yuan's expression changed. He stared blankly at the young man in front of him. He didn't even notice that the cigarette was about to burn his fingers. This is today's second monthly ticket, 2,500 plus updates, Chapter 1626, stopped. Remind everyone of your monthly and recommendation tickets. There will be a third update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1638. The ace of the Far East slowly straightened his body and looked at the tall man opposite him in a daze with satisfaction. He reached out and took the still-burning cigarette from Lu Yuan's hand. He casually threw it into the trash can not far away and repeated what he had just said. Winter is here. Will spring be far behind? Lu Yuan came back to his senses and subconsciously said, yes, because in some places it's winter all year round. At this moment, it was the ace of the Far East who was stunned. Although he had been puzzled for a long time, and although he had been mentally prepared when this person walked out from behind the holly tree and asked him about Yeltsin and Gorbachev, when he heard with his own ears that the other party had caught the code word he had thrown out, his heart still felt as if a hurricane had swept through the surface of the sea, and even the things hidden deep at the bottom of the sea had been dug out. The two of them stood silently in the snowy night and looked at each other, almost like two motionless sculptures. The snow was already falling fast, and soon a layer of sparkling snow covered their shoulders and heads. After a long time, Lu Yuan let out a soft sigh and said, "You're finally here?" His voice was so low and ethereal, and the moment it left his mouth, it disappeared without a trace with the snow. However, the ace of the Far East's sharp ears still caught this inexplicable sentence. He didn't deny it, but he didn't admit it either. Then he asked out of the blue, "You sent us the coordinates, right?" Lu Yuan reached out and brushed the snow off the ace of the Far East's head and shoulders. He said kindly, "Yes, you did a good job. It's the most gratifying thing that our country has a successor." The ace of the Far East's eyes instantly turned red, but he was already standing with his back to the light. Under the cover of the night, even Lu Yuan, who was opposite him, didn't notice this detail. He lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. "I've disappointed you. I came here purely for personal matters." Lu Yuan didn't smile. He shook his head solemnly. "No, I'm not disappointed. She's worth it." For outsiders, the standard for judging whether something should be done was whether it was worth it or not. However, Hua Xiaoheng knew very well that even if it wasn't worth it, he would still do it. This was the only time in his life that he had been willful, and it was also the choice he had made after careful consideration. However, he didn't refute Lu Yuan. He just said, "Thank you. If it weren't for you, my mother wouldn't have recovered." He now completely understood why Gunyanji had been sent to them and why he had been appointed to take over. Even though the man in front of her was in a foreign land, he was still concerned about Song Jinning's illness. In front of this person, Hua Xiaoheng did not need to pretend anymore. He was his senior and also his elder. "But how did you know about my mother?" Hua Xiaoheng was confused. As far as he knew, after the experiment failed 18 years ago, this person who was his uncle Hua Guanyuan disappeared without a trace. At that time he probably didn't know about Song Jinning's condition. At this moment, Lu Yuan also confessed his identity. He had hidden his identity for 18 years in this strange yet familiar world. "I'm your uncle Hua Guanyuan. After that failed experiment I was blasted unconscious. When I woke up I found myself lying in a strange place, and the 4 soldiers who came with me were already dead beside me." Hua Xiaoheng's heart tightened. This was caused by the fact that the corresponding bodies couldn't coexist in the same spacetime, right? Hua Guanyuan continued, "Then I met Lu Jin, Nianji's father. He was the first to discover the abnormal magnetic field fluctuations, find our coordinates, and help me cremate the 4 soldiers. It was also him. After understanding the situation of our experiment in detail, he told me about the possible consequences of the magnetic field resonance experiment. One of them was that the brain would be disturbed by the high-energy magnetic field, causing a genetic imbalance, which was also a phenomenon of mental disorder." Hua Guanyuan was a little embarrassed. He said embarrassedly, "Lu Jin helped me see your mother's condition through the magnetic field monitoring. At that time he could have used energy to directly contact the other world. However, he had used a small amount of energy, and what he saw was Song Jinning's mental disorder. From then on he had decided to help Song Jinning recover. Because Lu Jin had told him that this disorder was not incurable. However, Lu Jin did not have much energy stored at that time, and he was deeply distrustful of the other world. Therefore, after observing for a period of time, he turned off the monitoring to save energy. In the subsequent contact, he only gave Hua Guanyuan a very small amount of energy to communicate with the other world." Hua Guanyuan considered this complicated situation, and didn't want this kind of experiment to be used by those with ulterior motives on the other side. They would disregard the lives of the soldiers and forcefully conduct more experiments. Therefore he used a very obscure method to guide the other party step by step to achieve his goal of saving Song Jinning. In fact, his concerns were completely correct. Then he took out 4 military identification cards and said to Hua Xiaoheng, "These are their relics as well as their ashes. If there's a chance, help me bring them back." "Aren't you going back?" Hua Xiaoheng didn't take the 4 military identification cards. He asked calmly, "It's better if you take them back yourself." Hua Guanyuan gripped the 4 military identification cards tightly. Veins popped out on the back of his hand, and his voice was exceptionally hoarse. "I won't go back." "Oh. I heard that you haven't started a family here yet. You have a wife and daughter over there. Why don't you go back?" Hua Xiaoheng asked calmly. "Besides, our country needs people like you." Hua Xiaoheng sincerely admired this uncle of his. "No, I'm already old. Our country is relying on you now." Hua Guanyuan still stubbornly extended his hand and handed the 4 military identification cards to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the man in front of him quietly. He thought of his paintings and the things that were buried deep in his heart. He seemed to understand his stubbornness. "You're really not going back?" Hua Xiaoheng slowly reached out his hand with a deep regret on his face. "It's a pity that a lot has changed over the years. Have you paid attention to it?" Hua Guanyuan sighed again. "Every observation consumes energy. In order to save energy, we don't do meaningless surveillance. Every time the two worlds were connected, whether it was communication, real-time surveillance, or direct travel between the two worlds, it would consume energy. He and Lu Jin weren't as rich as He Qingjian and the others. They could contact the other world however they wanted and didn't care about the energy consumption. After all, they were acting on behalf of the country. They weren't like Hua Guanyuan and Lu Jin who were playing a small game. But it was also because of this that when He Qingjian ordered his men to kidnap Gunyanji and bring her back, Lu Jin fought an energy war with them. These people got carried away and used up the huge amount of energy they had stored, leaving only a little bit of energy left to monitor the other world. Hua Xiaoheng saw that Hua Guanyuan's understanding of their world was still stuck at the level of more than a decade ago, so he quickly began to explain to him. "My mother was mentally abused by your daughter, Hua Jialan, during those more than a decade of illness. She almost lost her life. If it weren't for Nianji, my mother wouldn't have lived to send me here." "What? Jialan? How dare she?" Hua Guanyuan almost lost his mind when he heard this. He gritted his teeth and a rare expression of anger appeared on his face. "Yes, and by Genie. Do you know her? After my mother fell ill, she took over the Institute of High Energy Physics of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and became my father's girlfriend. By the way, she killed your wife, Luo Xinxue, in order to take away your phone 11 years ago." After seeing Hua Guanyuan's extremely shocked expression again, Hua Xiaoheng said with satisfaction, "But don't be angry. Nianji has already helped Aunt clear her name and sent by Genie to prison. Hua Jialan, who is now Luo Jialan, is also in prison for treason." Hua Guanyuan's mind was digesting so much information that was completely different from what he knew, and his mind was in a mess. Even though he was especially good at hiding his emotions, he couldn't control his expression at this moment. "Xinxue is already dead? Bai Jini became your father's girlfriend? Then your mother?" Hua Guanyuan stammered, his heart beating like a drum. "Yes, my father divorced my mother many years ago on the grounds that she was seriously ill and couldn't live as a couple. That's why he could find a serious girlfriend." Hua Xiaoheng returned to his normal deep and magnetic voice. His tone was very heavy. Hua Guanyuan could hardly believe his ears. His face instantly turned red. "What reason did your father use? How could he be so shameless?" Hua Xiaoheng didn't want to talk about these things, so he immediately said, "By the way, we also know that Luo Jialan isn't your biological daughter, but the posthumous child of your comrade." Hua Guanyuan felt a little guilty about his wife's death. He didn't kill Boren, but Boren died because of him. If it weren't for that phone, Luo Xinxue wouldn't have been killed. Hua Guanyuan knew that he was responsible because he didn't treat her as his real wife at all. Therefore, he didn't expect that his relic would be handed over to his wife. "Then what about your grandmother?" Hua Guanyuan couldn't help asking. He had thought that his relic would be handed over to his mother, Xiezian. Hua Xiaoheng's expression truly dimmed. "Grandmother also passed away not long after you left." Hua Guanyuan thought about the changes in the world over the past 18 years and sorted out his thoughts. "In other words, your grandmother has passed away, Luo Xinxue is dead, Bai Jini and Luo Jialan are in prison, and your father and your mother divorced many years ago?" Hua Xiaoheng nodded heavily and asked hopefully, "Then do you still want to stay here?" This was the third watch of the day, chapter 1627, You're Finally Here. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi, everyone little angels. Chapter 1639. Hua Guanyuan was obviously in a state of disbelief and shock, but he was already able to control his expression and emotions, so he didn't make a sound. Hua Xiaoheng carefully observed Hua Guanyuan's expression. He thought for a moment and said, "Grandfather is still alive. However, after you left home, our family had another family with the surname Zhang." Hua Guanyuan narrowed his eyes slightly, and a faint sneer appeared on his lips. "Zhang? Is it head nurse Zhang and her son and grandson?" Hua Xiaoheng pursed his lips, his mind racing. "You knew? So you all know?" Hua Guanyuan nodded calmly. "Of course I know. Head nurse Zhang was hiding something, but I was too lazy to expose her. But as long as I'm here, she can forget about bringing the child she secretly gave birth to into the Hua family." Hua Xiaoheng smiled bitterly and shook his head. "When you weren't around, she brought her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren into the Hua family. She even said that she was comforting grandfather. How do we comfort him?" Hua Guanyuan was a little nervous. "Was your grandmother still around at that time?" "Not anymore." Hua Xiaoheng knew that this uncle had a close relationship with grandmother's mother, so he quickly explained, "Grandmother had already passed away when Zhang Feng brought her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren into the Hua family." As for the troubles that followed, Hua Xiaoheng did not intend to tell Hua Guanyuan now. Or rather, he should not be the one to say these things. The expression on Hua Guanyuan's face gradually became solemn. "So, if I'm gone and your grandmother is gone, your father and grandfather won't be doing human affairs anymore?" He didn't know how to respond. Hua Guanyuan could scold his father and brother like that, but even if Hua Xiaoheng agreed in his heart, he couldn't say it out loud. "This is too much." Hua Guanyuan punched the bare trunk of the parasol tree next to him. "Your grandfather used Zhang Feng to humiliate your grandmother, and your father used Bai Genie to humiliate your mother. What about you? Have you ever done anything for your grandmother and mother?" Hua Xiaoheng replied calmly, "I was only 12 years old then. May I ask what I could have done? Run away from home and become a delinquent? You left your mentally ill mother aside and did nothing about her?" Hua Xiaoheng didn't mean to mock Hua Guanyuan, but Hua Guanyuan's face burned when he heard it. He was living a peaceful life here alone. Wasn't that the same as throwing his mother aside and not caring about her? When he made up his mind to sacrifice, he thought that his mother would understand him. But when he found out that his mother had passed away before him, the heart-wrenching pain was almost unbearable for him. When he thought about how his mother had to send off her son, the pain and anxiety she must have felt was even heavier than his own. His eyes finally turned red. Hua Guanyuan's voice choked, but he said firmly, "Go back. I must go back." Hua Xiaoheng breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that Hua Guanyuan was getting emotional, he quickly said, "When grandmother passed away, she arranged everything. When you go back, I will show you my grandmother's will. She left you a fund, and I am in charge of it for the time being. When the time comes, I can pass it to you." Hua Guanyuan waved his hand and took a deep breath. He said, "No need. I'll give you all those things. Treat them as a wedding gift for you and Yanji." At the mention of Gun Yanji, Hua Guanyuan's gaze sharpened. "Are you going to continue hiding it from her?" Hua Xiaoheng nodded and said sincerely, "I hope you can help me deal with it, uncle. I'm worried that she won't be able to hide it. If He Jichu and He Qingjian find out, she'll suffer again. That time, when He Qingjian would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go, Gun Yanji resolutely took the bullet for him in front of him. He watched helplessly as she fell in his arms. At that moment he was completely stunned. His brain also felt like it had been hit by a sniper rifle, and it went blank for 2 to 3 seconds. For the first time he was at a loss. It was as if he was in a deserted wilderness, and he couldn't see anything. He only came back to his senses when He Jichu took her away from his arms. However, his posture could no longer be cold, and his voice could no longer pretend to be clear. He could only give a series of instructions to the KGB in a hoarse voice. At that time he knew that this girl's passion and love could not be stopped by anyone or anything. The luckiest thing in his life was to meet her. The best decision in his life was to fall in love with her. Hua Guanyuan also clearly thought of the time Gunyanji had been hit by a sniper rifle bullet. He said with lingering fear, "Okay, I understand. But if you're always by her side, aren't you afraid that she'll fall in love with someone else?" Hua Xiaoheng retracted his thoughts and smiled. "So what if she falls in love with someone else? She's still in love with me anyway." His words were arrogant, and asking for a beating. Hua Guanyuan instantly retracted his concern and sympathy and said coldly, Okay, then don't expect me to be nice to you in the future. That won't do. Hua Xiaoheng brushed the snow off his shoulders and said casually, I'm a Soviet diplomat. You're such a good person, so why would you be so mean to a diplomat? This will make Nianji suspicious. Just be respectful to me like before. Hua Guanyuan thought about Gu Nianji's relentless pursuit of the San Xian fried rice. He was both alert and aggrieved. He couldn't help but ask. Did you make her that kind of San Xian fried rice? The kind your mother made for you when you were young? He paused for a moment, then said proudly, It's the kind of San Xian fried rice that I taught your mother to make. It's also the only kind of rice that your mother knows how to make. Song Jining was a culinary idiot. God knew what method Hua Guanyuan had used to make a culinary idiot be able to make San Xian fried rice that was above average. That was a rare and cherished moment in Hua Guanyuan's memory. He would never share it with anyone even if he was beaten to death. Hua Xiaoheng frowned and immediately asked, You made San Xian fried rice for Nianji? Although Hua Guanyuan didn't want to admit it, he still nodded bitterly. She didn't know who I was, but she seemed to be very familiar with the taste of that kind of fried rice. She asked me where I learned it several times. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and rubbed his wrist. He said, Nianji is very smart. She won't forget what she eats after eating it once. That's why I said that I didn't know how to cook from the beginning. That way I wouldn't reveal any flaws. Slut. Hua Guanyuan glared at him, but he was happy for him. When he was Hua Xiaoheng's age, he wasn't as calm and composed as he was now. It was a good thing for the country that he was smarter and more capable than him. Only when each generation was smarter and more capable than the previous one would a country be able to prosper. Hua Xiaoheng shrugged nonchalantly and said, Then let's keep it the same for now. After I'm done here we'll discuss how to go back. He wouldn't reveal his identity to Gu Nianji until the last moment. Hua Guanyuan was reminded and quickly asked, What agreement did you make with the Soviet Union? They're not easy to get along with. Don't think that they'll help you selflessly. Hua Xiaoheng didn't tell Hua Guanyuan everything. He just said nonchalantly, I know. We're just taking what we need. After a pause, he placed his hand on Hua Guanyuan's shoulder and said firmly, I won't harm the interests of the Huaxia Empire here either. Although this country wasn't his, they were born from the same roots. He wouldn't forget his roots. I believe you. Hua Guanyuan patted his shoulder and sighed. This place is actually not bad. I've been here for 18 years and I've almost forgotten what it's like over there. Believe me, our place is better than this place, Hua Xiaoheng said calmly. His tone was deep and heavy, and he didn't allow anyone to question him. Okay, I'll wait to go home with you. Hua Guanyuan reached out his hand to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng shook it heavily when he saw this. At that moment, the last barrier in the hearts of the two men disappeared. The 18 years between the two of them had officially faded away. What they welcomed was a brand new future. Hua Guanyuan returned to the apartment floor. Instead of going to his room, he went straight to Lu Jin's apartment. Lu Jin was still awake. He was writing a program in front of the computer in the studio. Hua Guanyuan stood at the door of his studio and knocked on it. He asked calmly, Do you remember the call I asked you to make 8 years ago when we were planning to send Nianji to the other world? Lu Jin's typing hand paused for a moment. He rubbed his eyes and stomped on the ground. He turned the computer chair around and glared at Hua Guanyuan. Boss Lu, it's so late and you're telling me about what happened 8 years ago? Are you dreaming? Just pretend I'm dreaming. Hua Guanyuan said coldly, I asked you to call my mother. Who did you call? Lu Jin. He thought hard for a moment before saying, You called your mother? Seeing that Hua Guanyuan's expression was strange, Lu Jin quickly said, Time was too tight at the time, and I didn't want to waste too much energy. When I heard that the person who answered the phone was a woman, I thought it was your mother. After giving her a few instructions, she said she understood, so I hung up. What's wrong? Did I call the wrong number? Isn't she your mother? Hua Guanyuan's fingers clenched into fists, making cracking sounds. However, after glaring at Lu Jin for a long time, he slammed his fist on the door frame and turned to leave. This matter was already over, and Gu Nianji had been safely delivered to Hua Xiaoheng. Song Jining had also recovered because of this. There was no point in dwelling on who he had called back then. Moreover, Lu Jin was really a person of great fortune. His mistake had confused Bai Jini and did not expose Hua Guanyuan at all. Therefore, Hua Guanyuan was only angry for a while. When his anger subsided, he left. He didn't want to waste his breath on someone like Lu Jin. Because he knew that if he said too much, he would still be the one who would be angry. Lu Jin wouldn't feel that he had done anything wrong at all. Lu Jin was even more confused when he saw this situation. However, when he saw that Hua Guanyuan had left without saying anything else, he didn't feel conflicted at all. He turned around and continued programming. He wanted to crack all the internal codes of the Qin Corporation as soon as possible and download everything. He wanted to give it to Nianji as New Year's money during the Spring Festival. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1628, Great Fortune. A reminder to everyone about their monthly and recommendation votes. There would be a second update at 8 p.m. P.S. My Weibo account has changed its name. It's now called Author, Records of Cambrian. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1640. After a night of heavy snow, the entire imperial capital was wrapped in silver, like a sparkling and translucent crystal palace. Gunyanji had been excited and nervous for half the night. When she got home she fell into a deep sleep. It was like she had fainted. When she woke up again it was noon again. Hugging the blanket she sat up. She was still in a daze, and her mind was still immersed in last night's dream. But when she woke up she forgot most of last night's dream. She sat on the bed for a while and took out her phone from under the pillow. Sure enough, there were a few missed calls, most of which were from the King of Drama. There was only one call from Hijichu. Gunyanji thought about it and called Hijichu back first. Young Master He, what can I do for you? Gunyanji stayed on the bed and didn't want to get up. Hijichu could tell from her voice that she must have just woken up. He put down the work at hand and turned his chair to face the pure white snow outside the window. He said in a light voice, I want to invite you to Fragrant Mountain to admire the snow. Do you want to come? Admiring the snow in Xiangshan? Gunyanji was indeed looking forward to it. Moreover, she felt that ever since she had determined that the ace of the Far East was Major General Hua, she had been a little too engrossed. It would be terrible if Hua Xiao, who was extremely sensitive and observant, discovered that she had recognized him. So she needed to do something else to distract herself. Gunyanji chuckled softly and nodded. Okay, I just got up. I'm going to wash up now. Tell me the address. Hijichu had thought that Gunyanji was going to reject him with all sorts of excuses, but in the end she readily agreed. His spirits lifted. He stood up from his seat and said as calmly as he could, I'll pick you up. Gunyanji, looking at the heavy snow outside, he felt a headache coming on. It's snowing so heavily outside. How do we get there? Has the snow on the road been shoveled clean? Gunyanji walked to the window and carefully looked at the situation inside the neighborhood. The sidewalks in the apartment complex had been swept out and sprinkled with salt to prevent frostbite and slip. But on the main road outside he did not know how the sweeping was going. Gunyanji muttered. I'm afraid it's not easy to drive on this road. I'd better not go. You don't have to trouble yourself. Hijichu laughed. His shimmering, almond-shaped eyes reflected the white snow that filled the sky, and he had a beautiful charm that said, flowers are even more beautiful when they are in the extreme. It's no trouble at all. Hijichu reached for his coat and put it on before hurrying out of the office. Xie Qingying was wearing a red cashmere skirt coat and a 7-centimeter tall Stuart Weitzman's high-heeled boots walked towards him. Young Master He, are you going to Fragrant Mountain to admire the snow? She asked happily. Hijichu's heart skipped a beat. He said to Gunyanji, I'll go pick you up with Xie Qingying. Wait at home. I'll call you when we arrive. He hung up. Gunyanji had actually heard Xie Qingying speak on the other end of the line. Although she had only met and spoken to Xie Qingying once, she remembered her voice very clearly. Seeing that Xie Qingying was accompanying her, Gunyanji let down her guard and finally agreed to go. However, after hanging up, she thought to herself that Xie Qingying was her cousin. Should she ask her father if he could let her come over? Gunyanji quickly lifted the blanket and got up. She went to the bathroom to wash up and changed into a handsome stone-white ski jacket and tight black cashmere elastic pants. Because she was going to Fragrant Mountain to admire the snow outdoors, she specially picked a pair of UGG pure wool calfskin flat-heeled boots. These boots were very warm and had non-slip soles. With the help of a memory sponge, she wouldn't be tired at all when walking and climbing the mountain. When she came out of the bathroom, she saw that Lu Jin was already in the living room. She quickly said, Dad, young master He will come to pick me up later to admire the snow in Fragrant Mountain, she added. Xie Qingying will also come with him to pick me up. Xie Qingying's mother, Gu Tian, was Gu Xiangwen's sister, which was also Lu Jin's sister. However, the relationship between the siblings was very bad. Because of the severity of Lu Jin's interpersonal disorder, The siblings had not contacted each other for many years. Because of this, Lu Jin's relationship with Xie Dezhao, Gu Tian, and Xie Qingying's family was very indifferent. He waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "Then have fun. If that Xie Qingying from the new media company treats you badly, tell me. I'm her uncle after all. Seeing her uncle is like seeing her mother. I can teach her a lesson on behalf of her mother." Gu Nianji was dumbfounded. "Is that how you use seeing your uncle is like seeing your mother? Why can't it be used like that?" Lu Jin shook his head disdainfully. "You can't just enjoy the benefits of seeing your uncle is like seeing your mother, and not bear the obligation of seeing your uncle is like seeing your mother, right?" Gu Nianji understood now. She thought about it carefully and realized that there was nothing wrong with it. The advantage of seeing your uncle was like seeing your mother was that your uncle could take care of his nephew like his mother. The obligation of seeing your uncle was like seeing your mother was that your uncle could teach his nephew a lesson like his mother. Gu Nianji gave Lu Jin a thumbs up. "Dad, you have the potential to be a lawyer too. Look at this analysis of rights and obligations. But if you use your identity as her uncle to teach her a lesson, wouldn't you be exposed?" Gu Nianji said seriously, "So it's better not to do anything." "Don't you trust your daughter? I'm your daughter. How can I be at a disadvantage?" As the two of them were talking, they suddenly heard the roar of a helicopter outside. Even the windows were shaking from the vibrations. Gu Nianji and Lu Jin walked to the window and looked out. They saw a Bell 407 GXP helicopter descend from the sky and stop on the balcony above their heads. Gu Nianji's phone rang again. It was He Jichu. "Nianji, come to the roof. I'll take you to Xiangshan." Gu Nianji immediately understood. He Jichu had come to pick her up in a helicopter. She smiled happily and quickly put her backpack on her back. She nodded at Lu Jin and ran out quickly without saying anything. Lu Jin was a little worried, so he quietly followed behind her and watched her get into the elevator and go to the roof. The snow on the roof of the apartment building had been swept clean, but under the huge drive of the helicopter's propellers, the snow piled in the corner of the wall was blown everywhere. Gu Nianji pushed open the door to the top floor, and her face was almost covered by the incoming snowflakes. She quickly put on her down jacket and ferret fur hat and covered her mouth to hide. Not long after, the helicopter's propellers stopped completely. He Jichu, wearing a winter leather jacket, jumped out of the helicopter and walked towards her. "Nianji, why aren't you wearing a mask?" He reached out to her. "I still have a few masks on the plane. Go and try one on." Gu Nianji held his hand and the two of them got into the helicopter together. On the plane, Xie Qingying, who was dressed in a fiery red dress, nodded slightly at Gu Nianji and said with a smile, "Hello, Miss Gu." Gu Nianji looked her up and down and nodded with a smile. "Miss Xie is so beautiful today." Xie Qingying's smile widened. "Thank you for the compliment, Miss Gu. Cousin Xie, we don't have to be so polite, do we?" Gu Nianji made a face at her. "It's more affectionate to call you cousin." Xie Qingying saw that Gu Nianji was being generous, so she didn't pretend to be polite with her. She smiled and said, "Okay, I'll call you Nianji." He Jichu sat in the pilot's seat and began to pilot the helicopter into the air. Gu Nianji and Xie Qingying fastened their seatbelts and sat together to chat. Gu Nianji could clearly feel that this Xie Qingying was much more affectionate than the last time she saw her. This was the second update of the day, Chapter 1629, Seeing Your Uncle is Like Seeing Your Mother. A reminder for everyone's monthly and recommendation votes. P.S. I've changed the name of my Weibo account. It's now called Author Cambrian. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1641. The last time Gu Nianji spoke to Xie Qingying up close was at the Lu Corporation celebration party in H City. She had specifically asked her about Xie Zian. Xie Qingying sat next to her and opened a small fridge by her feet. She bent down to look at it and asked, "Nianji, what do you want to drink? Juice, coffee and tea?" Gu Nianji asked for juice. Xie Qingying carefully poured it into a small paper cup and handed it to her. Gu Nianji smiled and thanked her. She lowered her head to take a sip of juice and started chatting with her. "Cousin Xie, is there a place in Xiangshan that specializes in enjoying the snow?" Gu Nianji asked curiously. When she was in the other world, she had only gone to Xiangshan to see the red leaves, but she hadn't had the chance to see the snow. Xie Qingying smiled and said, "There's a place in Xiangshan called Fragrant Snow Sea. It's actually a plum garden. In winter the plum blossoms bloom and it snows heavily. It's the best place to enjoy the snow." Gu Nianji thought about the scene Xie Qingying had described. The plum blossoms were in full bloom, and the plum blossoms were covered with layers of sparkling snow. The plum blossoms were less white than the snow, but the snow was more fragrant than the plum blossoms. The white snow and red plum blossoms complemented each other. Just thinking about it made one drunk. Gunyenji smiled and teased, "Such a good place should collect the snow on the plum blossoms and put it in a blue and white porcelain jar. It'll definitely be good to use it to make tea in the summer." Xie Qingying was very surprised. "Nianji, I heard that you grew up abroad. I didn't expect you to know so much about our classical culture." Gunyenji choked. How had she grown up abroad? She had grown up in the opposite Wuxia Empire. Of course, she also knew that her experience couldn't be told to outsiders. Other than the few people at the top, the only people who knew where she had been in the past few years were He Zhichu, Wen Shui, and Qin Yaoguang. The others had all had their memories removed, including Qin Jining. Gunyenji's thoughts turned to Qin Jining. She immediately connected to the special communication channel on the helicopter and used her headset to ask He Zhichu, who was sitting in the driver's seat, "Young Master He, what is Qin Jining doing now? Has he been released?" There was a lot of noise in the helicopter, so it was easier to talk to the pilot in front through a special line. He Zhichu wore a very cool pair of aviator sunglasses and focused on the data on the instrument panel. He noticed that someone was speaking on the helicopter's dedicated communication channel, so he accepted it. Hearing that it was Gunyenji who was asking about Qin Jining, she said casually into the microphone, "He's still locked up. What's wrong? Don't you want to pursue the matter? If you don't pursue the matter, he'll be fine." Qin Jining's brother, Qin Ziyuan, had begged him for a long time, but He Zhichu hadn't relented. He was bent on giving this favor to Gunyenji. Gunyenji didn't know that Qin Ziyuan had been begging He Zhichu, but she still nodded and said, "It's almost the new year. Let him come out for the new year." Actually, he didn't do anything wrong. It was just that his brain wasn't working well. "This time I'll lock him up for a while so that he'll learn not to be so impatient in the future." He Zhichu agreed and said, "Okay, when we get to Xiangshuahai, I'll call them and ask his brother to pick him up." "Thank you, young Master He," Gunyenji said sweetly. She seemed to be in a good mood. After saying this, she turned off the communication channel and couldn't help picking up her phone to look at it again. Last night, after the ace of the Far East left, she had secretly released the King of Drama from the blacklist. Although she still didn't want to answer his call, she felt a sense of accomplishment when she saw his missed call. Xie Qingying took good care of Gunyenji from the side. At that moment, she cut another plate of fruit and placed it in front of her. She said, "I didn't know what kind of fruit you liked, so I cut some randomly. Try it and see which one tastes better." Gunyenji saw that the fruit plate was filled with common fruits. She glanced over and saw yellow oranges, snow-white bananas, pink and tender lychees, red dragon fruits, ivory mangosteen, jackfruit, translucent green carambola, mangosteen that looked like water chestnuts, and egg fruit that tasted the same as egg yolk. She ate a piece of orange first. She had thought that it was a very ordinary fruit, but when she ate it, she realized that it was definitely not an ordinary fruit. It tasted as sweet as honey, and a little bit of sourness perfectly neutralized the excessive sugar in the orange. It actually left a fragrant taste in her mouth. Gunyenji's eyes suddenly lit up and she said, "These oranges are specially supplied, right? Only specially supplied fruits would have such quality." Xie Qingying raised her willowy eyebrows and said with a smile, "Huh? You also know about the special supply?" Gunyenji chuckled and shook her head. "I don't know. I'm just a commoner. How would I know about the legendary special supply?" Xie Qingying heard her say that and understood that she was unhappy. She quickly apologized. "Nianji, that's not what I meant. You grew up abroad, so I thought there was no such thing as special supply overseas." Gunyenji reflected on herself and felt that she had made a mountain out of a molehill. To be honest, she didn't have much of a relationship with Xie Qingying. Although the two of them were considered relatively close relatives, as the saying went, distant relatives were not as good as close neighbors. The two families hadn't been in contact for so many years, and she and Xie Qingying were like strangers. It was better not to be too demanding. Therefore she quickly smiled and said, No, I was just joking. Even if you haven't seen a pig walk, you've eaten pork, haven't you?" She deliberately said, "Even if you haven't eaten pork, you've seen a pig walk," to ease the atmosphere. Moreover, as a child on the internet, she had really eaten pork, but had never seen a pig in the real world. Xie Qingying covered her mouth and laughed even harder. "Nianji, you're so funny." She felt that Gunyenji was a more and more interesting person. The distance between the two of them quickly narrowed. However, it didn't take long before He Zhichu asked them to prepare to get off the plane because Xiangshuahai had already arrived. Hijichu parked the helicopter in an empty field 500 meters away from fragrant snow sea plum garden. If the helicopter stopped too close, it would affect the snow on the plum blossoms and destroy the snow scenery. After the helicopter stopped, Gunyenji took Hijichu's arm and got off the helicopter. As soon as she got off the helicopter, she smelled a thin, sweet fragrance. She couldn't help but take a deep breath and smiled. This is indeed a good place to enjoy the snow. Hijichu let her stand firmly and turned around to reach out to Xie Qingying on the helicopter. Xie Qingying smiled and said, "I can get off by myself." As she spoke, she had already valiantly gotten off the helicopter. She wore a fiery red coat and 7-centimeter black boots. Her long, wavy hair flowed down her back, and her red lips were like flames. Against the white snow on the plum blossoms, she was incomparably beautiful. Gunyenji was stunned by the sight. Xie Qingying stood beside Hijichu with a smile, like a perfect couple. Behind them was the spotless silver-white helicopter. Just looking at the scene, it was like a giant photo of a helicopter advertisement. Gunyenji couldn't help but take out her phone and take several photos of them. At that moment, a gust of wind blew, and Xie Qingying's long wavy hair fluttered in the wind. A strand of hair happened to sweep in front of Hijichu, carrying a natural fragrance. Hijichu's eyes were lowered, and his shimmering almond-shaped eyes were hidden under his thick eyelashes. His handsome face had a slight smile as he looked at Xie Qingying. Xie Qingying's eyes were practically glued to Hijichu. Gunyenji finally understood. So cousin Xie had taken a fancy to Hijichu. She looked at Hijichu, then at Xie Qingying and nodded in satisfaction. From their appearances, the two of them really looked like a good match. Moreover, one was the prime minister's niece, and the other was a major general in the military. Also, one was her biological cousin, and the other was her sworn brother. She gave them full marks and wasn't afraid that they would be proud. Hijichu saw Gunyenji raising her phone to take pictures of them, but didn't stop her. He strode over and said, "Come, let's take a selfie." As he spoke, he took the phone from Gunyenji and raised it high, aiming it at himself and Gunyenji. Gunyenji was overjoyed. From this angle, Hijichu's face was in the front, and her face was in the back, making her face look small. It looked good. Hijichu mainly aimed at Gunyenji and pressed a few buttons. Then he took out his phone and used AirDrop to send the photos to his phone. Gunyenji quickly said, "Let me see." Gunyenji quickly said, "Let me see." Hijichu returned the phone to her and quickly strode away. Gunyenji looked at his back in confusion, then looked down at the selfie Hijichu had taken of the two of them. Gunyenji looked at his back in confusion, then looked down at the selfie Hijichu had taken of them earlier. Gunyenji was furious when she saw it. Hijichu's face was thin, and his facial features were deep and three-dimensional. With this kind of face, no matter how the photo was taken, her face still looked small. Hijichu's face was thin, and his facial features were deep and three-dimensional. With this kind of face, no matter how the photo was taken, her face still looked small. And because of Hijichu's comparison in front of the camera, Gunyenji's face looked even bigger in the back. "Young master, delete the photo. Take another one." Gunyenji frowned as she put away her phone and quickly chased after him. Xie Qingying looked at Gunyenji playing around like a child. She shook her head with a smile and slowly walked behind her. She was wearing high-heeled boots so she couldn't run in the snow. Gunyenji caught up with Hijichu and jumped to ask him for his phone. Hijichu acted as if he didn't hear her and strode forward with a smile. Sometimes he would deliberately take a step to the side and do an ice skating motion. Gunyenji almost fell. Hijichu didn't help her up. Instead he laughed out loud. Under the blue sky, his smile was especially bright and clear in the snow. It was like the snow on plum blossoms, plain and beautiful. Xie Qingying couldn't take her eyes off him, so she couldn't help running after him. She almost forgot that running on this kind of ground with her 7-centimeter high high-heeled boots was a disaster. With a thud, she fell to the ground. She had sprained her ankle. Gunyenji heard the sound and turned around to look. She quickly called out to Hijichu, "Young master, cousin Xie fell." Hijichu turned around and saw Xie Qingying sitting on the black mountain road that had just been swept. The hem of her red cashmere coat was already covered in black soil, but she wasn't too upset. She only smiled and said, "I think I sprained my ankle. Young master, do you know if there's any ointment in the fragrant snow sea?" Hijichu walked back and knelt on one knee in front of her. He lifted her calf with one hand and touched her ankle with the other. Through the leather boots she couldn't feel it very clearly, but Xie Qingying's brows clearly furrowed. It was probably more painful. Gunyenji quickly said, "Young Master He, shall we help cousin Xie over?" Xie Qingying struggled to stand up and said embarrassedly, "No need, it's not very painful. I'll be fine after resting for a while." She endured the pain in her ankle and tried her best to walk normally. However, with every step she took, beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She didn't know that her face was whiter than snow. Gunyanji poked Hijichu's arm and whispered, "Young Master He, cousin Xie is in a lot of pain. I think she sprained her ankle quite badly." Hijichu looked at her for a while and secretly clenched his fists. He turned to Xie Qingying and said, "Come, I'll carry you." With a calm expression, he half squatted down in front of her and gave her his entire back. Xie Qingying was at a loss. Happiness had come too quickly and she didn't know how to deal with it. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1630, Fragrant Snow Sea. Remind everyone of your monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1642. Gunyanji advised from the side, "Cousin Xie, if it really hurts, don't hold on. I know the pain of a sprained ankle. It's like walking on the tip of a knife." Xie Qingying was embarrassed. If she continued to refuse, it would seem like she was being unreasonable. She nodded at Gunyanji. "Nyenji, thank you. I won't stand on ceremony then." She gently attached herself to Hijichu's broad shoulders, narrow waist, and inverted triangular back. Xie Qingying thought to herself as she clung to Hijichu's hard shoulder. She didn't expect young Master He to look thin, but he was actually quite muscular. Her pretty face blushed slightly. She put her head on the side of Hijichu's neck and was carried all the way into Xiangshuai's gate. Gunyanji followed beside Hijichu and Xie Qingying. She helped hold Xie Qingying by the side as she looked around curiously. No wonder this place was called Xiangshuai. It was because there were 3 big words inscribed on a big stone next to the entrance gate. The house in Plum Garden was built in an antique style. The wall was a wooden fence painted with tung oil. There was also a screen wall facing the gate, blocking the scene in the courtyard. After going around the screen wall, an ancient-style mansion on the top of the mountain appeared in front of them. Green tiles, white walls, black pillars, front eaves and back buildings. The windows were covered with snow-white paper, and there were a few lanterns hanging from the eaves of the corridor. Gunyanji couldn't take it all in. She didn't pay attention to the road under her feet and almost fell. Although Hijichu was looking ahead with Xie Qingying on his back, he kept looking at Gunyanji from the corner of his eye. Gunyanji's body had just turned sideways when Hijichu immediately reached out and held her arm firmly. "Thank you, young Master He." Gunyanji thanked him with a smile and helped him hold Xie Qingying on his back. Xie Qingying's heart was beating wildly. Her attention was completely focused on Hijichu, so she didn't notice what had just happened. It wasn't until Gunyanji held her back that she turned to look at her and asked with concern, "What's wrong, Nyenji? Is something the matter?" Gunyanji smiled and pointed at the gate in front of them. "We're almost there. Later, ask the people here if they have any medicine. I think safflower oil is very good." Xie Qingying smiled and said, "Safflower oil is indeed not bad, but it tastes a little strong. If not, you can apply ice to it temporarily." Gunyanji nodded and looked up to see that the door of the mansion in front of her had already opened. A handsome young man in a smoky gray cashmere cardigan walked out and said in surprise, "Young Master He? You're finally here." When he saw Xie Qingying on Hijichu's back, the man smiled mischievously. "What's wrong with Miss Xie? Young Master He, could it be that you lost a bet, so you have to carry our Miss Xie in?" Xie Qingying quickly said, "Shaoli, don't talk nonsense. I just sprained my ankle and can't walk. By the way, do you have any ointment here? For example, safflower oil?" "Did you really sprain your ankle?" The young man named Little Li looked at Hijichu in surprise, then quickly glanced at Xie Qingying's legs in high-heeled boots. It was indeed difficult to walk in these boots on a snowy day. Xiao Li's expression turned serious. "I'm going to find someone to get some medicinal wine. Do you want me to call another doctor over?" "There's no need to trouble yourself. I have a family doctor at home. I'll just ask him to take a look at me tonight," Xie Qingying quickly said with a smile. It would be too troublesome to reject Xiao Li. Xiao Li had his own ideas. Whether he only wanted the medicinal wine or to hire a doctor, he would have to see Xie Qingying's injuries before making a decision. He turned around and pulled open the thick leather curtain to let Hijichu carry Xie Qingying in. As soon as he pulled open the curtain, the sound of music could be heard from inside. It was like the sound of a guzheng, like the gurgling of spring water. It was especially warm and moving on this snowy day. Gunyenji enjoyed the beautiful music and followed him in. As soon as she entered the house, she realized that the mansion was really a different world. The 3 rooms of the ancient building, 1 bright and 2 dark, were all connected to become a large living room that could be used as a ballroom. On the left and right sides, there were irregularly shaped treasure pavilions that were divided into several small spaces that were connected to each other and relatively independent. In each small space, there was a postmodern style sofa with a simple and exquisite shape. The floor around the sofa was covered with geometric patterns. In the corner on the right side of the wall on the north side, there was a small garden surrounded by green plants. In the octagonal pavilion with a small bridge and flowing water, a beautiful girl in an ancient costume sat in the octagonal pavilion and played the guzheng. The living room was filled with young men and women dressed in low-key and luxurious clothes. They sat or stood in groups of 2s and 3s, forming small groups. They held cocktail glasses and chatted and joked with each other. The atmosphere was very harmonious and friendly. Gunyenji was amazed. The city sure knew how to have fun. She was a country bumpkin, so she should go back to the countryside. Yijichu and Xie Qingying were nowhere to be seen. Xiao Li, who had led them in earlier, walked over with a smile and said, "Miss Gu, right? Young master." He took Sister Xie to check on her injuries. "Have a seat, don't stand on ceremony." Gunyenji also smiled and greeted him. "Sorry to trouble you, Mr. Li. Xie Qingying is my cousin. I also want to see how her injuries are." "Sister Xie is your cousin? Oh, then you're my cousin." Xiao Li beamed. "My mother is Sister Xie's father's distant cousin." Gunyenji had a headache because of the relationship. She could only chuckle and say, "Where are they? I'll go take a look." "Hey Miss Gu, let's not be the third wheel." Xiao Li stopped her with a laugh. "Is it not fun here? Shall I find a handsome guy to talk to you?" Gunyenji quickly waved her hand. No need, no need. I'm just worried about cousin Xie. It's not a minor injury to sprain your ankle wearing such high-heeled boots. That's why I've already sent someone to get a doctor." Xiao Li whispered, "Don't let cousin Xie know." His careful teasing made Gunyenji relax. She nodded and said, "Okay." She then asked him, "Are you very familiar with cousin Xie and young master He?" "Yes, we've known each other since we were young." Xiao Li looked Gunyenji up and down and smiled. "Actually, we played together when we were young, but you definitely don't remember me." Gunyenji pointed at her head and smiled. "Yes, I don't remember what happened before I was 12 years old. Some I remember, some I don't." Actually, she didn't remember anything at all, but because of the lawsuit with Qin Yaoguang and the others, she had to remember part of what happened before she was 12 years old. Otherwise, Lu Jin's secret identity would be exposed. Gunyenji was very cautious. She wouldn't let anyone have anything against her at any time. Xiao Li shook his head regretfully and said, "But you're much prettier than you were when you were young. Are you single now? Can I pursue you?" Gunyenji was amused by Xiao Li's serious expression. She avoided the topic and said, "I'm still young, so I have to focus on my career now. But Mr. Li, you're not being nice. You clearly like the girl who plays the zither over there. Why are you trying to take advantage of me?" Xiao Li rubbed his chin and asked in confusion, "Is it that obvious? I thought I covered it up very well. When you were talking to me, your eyes glanced over there every 5 seconds on average. You call that a good cover-up?" Gunyenji couldn't help pursing her lips in disdain. Compared to Huo Xiaoheng, who was the king of drama, Xiao Li wouldn't last more than 3 seconds in a TV series. "Hehe, isn't she very beautiful? She plays the zither so beautifully, although I don't understand it at all." Xiao Li whispered to her, making her very happy. Not long after, Xiao Li's phone suddenly rang. He took it out and looked at it. He quickly stood up and said, "The doctor I invited has arrived. I'm going to pick him up. Miss Gu, please help yourself." Gunyenji quickly waved her hand. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Hurry up and bring the doctor to examine cousin Xie." Not long after Xiao Li left, he came back with someone. Gunyenji looked up at the door and saw 2 men and a woman following Xiao Li in. The man walking next to Xiao Li was tall and carried a small medicine box. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and looked gentle and elegant. He followed Xiao Li to a small door on the east side of the living room without looking sideways. The other man and woman didn't follow him in. They stood at the door and glanced at the situation in the living room. Gunyenji glanced at the 2 of them curiously and suddenly felt that they looked a little familiar. The woman standing at the door had long black hair and thick bangs that covered her slender eyes. She was very flirtatious. She had snow-white skin, a small nose and mouth, and a face as round as a full moon. Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat. She thought that this woman was a little similar to Wuxia. However, she wasn't as scholarly as Wuxia. The man's facial features were good, but his eyes were cloudy and his gaze was wretched. It made people uncomfortable to look at him. Gunyanji looked away and decided to take another look at the girl playing the zither in the octagonal pavilion to clear her eyes. At that moment, the man with the wretched eyes also saw the girl playing the zither in the octagonal pavilion. His eyes lit up and he wanted to rush over to talk to her, but he was held back by the woman beside him. Second brother, don't look for that kind of unpresentable woman again. How many times have you played with this kind of woman? Aren't you tired of her? The woman who had followed the doctor said impatiently, then pointed in Gunyanji's direction. Even if you want to look for someone, you have to look for that one over there. If you marry her, you can struggle less for more than 10 years. This was the second update of the day, chapter 1631, Struggle Less for More Than 10 Years. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi everyone little angels. Chapter 1643. The young man with the lewd eyes casually glanced at Gunyanji, and his eyes suddenly froze. Such long legs, such a thin waist, and such a voluptuous chest. This figure was too unscientific. The man was almost drooling. Who is this? Is she from a good family? Why haven't I seen such a hot girl in the upper echelons of the imperial capital? The man smiled lecherously. When he saw Gunyanji looking over, he immediately held the door frame and posed, winking at her. Gunyanji, where did this idiot come from? She quietly looked away and stood up from the sofa. Seeing that she was about to leave, the woman who had followed the doctor quickly pushed the man's arm and said, She's the famous Gunyanji. Don't you know? I told you that you shouldn't be hanging around those young models all day long. Which girl from a good family would come out to be a young model at such a young age? You deal with these unpresentable people all day long. How can you get to know a really good girl? She's Gunyanji? The man was shocked and quickly stood up. She's the Gunyanji who sent Auntie Chin to prison. Yes, who else could it be? The woman nodded and lowered her voice. Look at what she's done, but the old master still treats her as his granddaughter. He has no intention of pursuing the matter at all. I heard that this new year, the old master will invite her back to change her surname, acknowledge her ancestors and celebrate the new year together. Look, even if Auntie Chin isn't in prison and has a criminal record, she's still Auntie Chin's only daughter and the old master's only granddaughter. Do you know why she changed her surname? The man with the lewd eyes was even more interested. Change her surname? Acknowledge her ancestors? Is it to determine the inheritance rights? These people's families were considered rich and had a certain social status. As the third generation of rich people, they were most concerned about inheritance rights. That's what everyone guesses. The woman looked around and said, Look, no one is stupid. Didn't young master he bring her to Xiangshuahai? This circle is filled with the descendants of the top of the upper echelons. With our status we usually can't get in. If I hadn't come with fourth brother Chin, I would have been stopped by those guards at the foot of the mountain, let alone entering the gate. Gunyanji was a newcomer, so she knew nothing about Xiangshuahai's supreme position among the second generation of the imperial capital's upper class. However, the two of them knew it very well. So if you marry her, you'll have one foot in the capital's upper class. At that time, do you still have to worry about not having the right to inherit? With that said, the woman patted the man's shoulder and said with a smile, Second brother, be bold and go. I have faith in you. The man was so aroused by her words that he didn't care about anything else. He quickly came to Gunyanji's side and said politely and attentively, Miss Gu, right? Where were they going? Shall I accompany you? Although he could do whatever he wanted with those young models, he didn't dare to act rashly with women of high status. As the heir of a wealthy family, it would be a waste of his time in the imperial capital if he did not have this kind of judgment. The woman beside him patted her head. She had given up all hope on this brother of hers. She quickly leaned over and smiled at Gunyanji. You're Miss Gu, right? I'm Luo Piapiao and he's my second brother Luo Yaozu. Although it's a little presumptuous, we're still relatives. Please forgive me if I've offended you in any way. Gunyanji originally wanted to ignore the two of them, but seeing that they were taking the initiative, especially the girl, she looked more and more like Wuxia when she smiled. Although her temperament was different, her facial features were there. Gunyanji's brain was like a high-performance computer. It had already stored the girl's appearance in her mind and automatically analyzed and compared it with Wuxia's appearance. The more she looked at them, the more she felt that they were quite similar. Her heart skipped a beat and she said politely, "Really? I just came back and haven't met any relatives yet. May I ask which of my parents are you related to?" "Your mother, of course." Luo Piapiao clasped her hands and smiled. "Your mother, Auntie Chin, is also our aunt." "Oh." Gunyanji calmly walked to the high chair at the bar counter and sat down. She raised her chin. "Have a seat." The place she had been in earlier was a little remote in the hall. She didn't know what was good for the two of them, so it was safer to go to a crowded place. This wasn't a great skill. As a single woman, she should have this kind of vigilance when she was at a bar. Not only were there several men and women chatting at the bar counter, but there were also two very powerful bartenders wiping wine glasses and mixing drinks. Gunyanji knew that these two bartenders must also be the bodyguards and thugs of this place. Sure enough, after she sat down, the handsome bartender on the left walked over with a smile and nodded at her. "Miss Gu, what would you like to drink?" He added, "Young master, he has instructed that Miss Gu can't drink alcohol yet. She can only drink milk and juice." Gunyanji had originally sat on the high chair with her feet crossed. She had planned to pretend to be a seasoned regular at the bar to satisfy her craving and suppress the siblings. However, she was exposed by the bartender in less than a second. She felt embarrassed and angrily knocked on the bar counter in front of her. "I'm already 20 years old and an adult. Why can't I drink?" Luo Yaozu, who was next to her, watched with his mouth open for a while and quickly said, "Miss Gu, what kind of wine would you like to drink? I'll buy it for you." "Who are you?" The handsome bartender didn't wait for Gunyanji to speak and immediately looked at Luo Yaozu. "I don't remember you being on the customer list. Do you have an invitation? Or an ID card? I'll go check the guest list." They didn't open their business to the public. They used the system of a private clubhouse. If one wanted to come in, they first had to pay a sky-high deposit from a guarantor, and then they had to pay an annual fee of more than 7 figures. After paying the annual fee, one couldn't come as they pleased. When there was an event, the clubhouse would send out invitations. Only the members of the clubhouse who received the invitations could come. This greatly protected the privacy of the members of the clubhouse. Ijichu hadn't appeared in this clubhouse in all these years, but he was one of the founders. Now that he was back, a group of childhood friends and former partners wanted to get together with him. It wasn't easy for him to relent. Everyone took advantage of the snow to book a place called Xiangshuahai and invite him to connect with everyone. The bartender looked at the list of guests for today and was sure that the two of them weren't there. Luo Piapiao didn't expect a bartender to be so arrogant, especially in front of Gunyanji. She couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. She slapped the bar counter with her hand and said, "Brother Li invited us here. He personally brought my brother Chin in just now." "Brother Chin?" The bartender looked at the door thoughtfully. "Is it the orthopedic doctor we hired just now?" "What orthopedic doctor?" "My brother Chin is the famous head of the orthopedic department in the Chin Hospital Corporation." Luo Piapiao was so angry that she was about to turn into a puffer. Luo Yaozu, on the other hand, was a little terrified. The bartender flexed his muscles at him, and he was so weak that he wanted to hide under the table. Gunyanji looked at the siblings coldly. Although their characters weren't very good, they might be an entry point to dig into the Chin family's history. However, she still had to confirm their identities. Therefore, Gunyanji didn't stop the bartender from questioning the siblings. She just smiled and watched the show from the side. Another bartender walked over with a smile and handed Gunyanji a glass of warm milk. "Miss Gu, this is organic milk. It's mellow and delicious." Gunyanji took it resentfully, inserted the straw and took a sip. She leaned her back against the bar counter and snorted. "No matter how extravagant you are, it's just a glass of milk. Do you dare to give me a cocktail?" "No, no." The two bartenders laughed together and looked up. "Young master, he is here." Gunyanji looked up from the milk straw and saw Hijichu striding over from the other side of the living room. When Luo Piapiao saw Hijichu, she was so excited that she couldn't walk. "Young master, he..." She stammered as she greeted him, wishing she could kneel under his well-ironed suit pants. Hijichu glanced at her and nodded slightly. He came to Gunyanji's side and rubbed her head. His cold expression softened slightly. "Why are you unhappy? Did your new friend make you unhappy?" Gunyanji put the milk on the bar counter. Her dark jade-like eyes darted around nimbly as she said, "How am I unhappy? This is Luo Yaozu and this is Luo Piapiao. The siblings say they are the children of Qin Yaoguang and her sister." Hijichu sat down and took the red wine from the bartender. He said, "Qin Yaoguang is an only daughter. How could she have any sisters? Gu Nianji let out an ah, and looked at the Luo siblings in confusion. Luo Piapiao quickly said, "My mother is Auntie Qin's cousin. We're really relatives of the Qin family." Cousin? That's possible. He Jichu rubbed his forehead. It seems that Qin Yaoguang's family is the only one with few children. The other families are quite fertile. Gu Nianji, this was the first update of the day, chapter 1632, pretty similar to you and your bones. Remind everyone of your monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1644. Luo Piapiao was overjoyed to see that He Jichu agreed with her. I'm not lying, am I? I told you that I'm Auntie Qin's niece and I'm Miss Gu's cousin. Luo Piapiao went up to hold Gu Nianji's hand. Gu Nianji didn't like physical contact with strangers, so she quietly moved closer to He Jichu. He Jichu understood and looked up at Luo Piapiao. Although there was no expression in his sparkling almond-shaped eyes, it was as if he was flirtatious as long as he looked at someone. Luo Piapiao felt like she couldn't breathe. Her hands and feet instantly stiffened and she couldn't move. This was the first time she had close contact with her male idol, and she regretted not dressing up more prettily. Gu Nianji saw that He Jichu was able to make Luo Piapiao at a loss with just one look. She was very impressed by him, so she gently patted his shoulder and gave him an encouraging look. He Jichu glared at her, curled his finger and knocked Gu Nianji on the forehead. He smiled. Impudent. His expression had always been cold and composed, but this smile was like an ice sculpture that had suddenly melted into a pool of spring water. Luo Piapiao felt her legs go weak. She had no choice but to grab onto Luo Yaozu beside her so that she wouldn't make a fool of herself. Luo Yaozu didn't dare say anything. He Jichu's powerful aura was cold and solemn. He didn't even look at him, but he felt like he had been pierced by He Jichu's heart by 10,000 arrows. Not only did his face hurt but his chest also hurt. Luo Piapiao pinched Luo Yaozu, wanting him to be more promising and at least get close to He Jichu. That way, even if he couldn't get Gu Nianji, he could still get close to young Master He and still be able to do whatever he wanted in the Luo family. However, Luo Yaozu was completely useless. His carefree demeanor in front of the young model was completely useless now. Luo Piapiao had no choice but to rack her brains to talk to Gu Nianji. Cousin Gu, are you free recently? I want to invite you to my house for a casual meal. Luo Piapiao smiled unexpectedly warmly. Your house. Gu Nianji actually wanted to go. It would be even better if she could meet Luo Piapiao's mother. However, before she could think it through, she heard Xie Qingying's voice. I haven't been here for a while. Why does my cousin have a cousin again? Xie Qingying held Xiao Li's arm and walked towards them. Beside them was a young man wearing a light brown wool suit jacket. His eyes were calm, his facial features were delicate, and his expression was restrained. His gait was methodical and he looked more mature than his age. Gu Nianji's gaze fell on the simple medicine box in the man's hand. She wondered if this was the fourth brother Qin she knew. She didn't have a good impression of the Qin family, so she only glanced at him briefly before looking away. She lowered her head and obediently sat next to He Jichu to drink her warm milk. Luo Piapiao and Luo Yaozu pounced forward as expected. Fourth brother is here. Monsieur, are you feeling better? One of them was holding brother Qin's hand, while the other was fawning over Xie Qingying. Xie Qingying glanced at them and smiled at Luo Piapiao. I heard you call Nianji cousin just now. Why didn't I know I had another relative? Nianji's mother and my mother are cousins. Luo Piapiao quickly explained and asked in surprise, is Miss Xie's family also related to the Qin family? Otherwise, why would she also call Gu Nianji her cousin? Xie Qingying leaned against the bar counter and sat down. She said with a half smile, why should I be related to the Qin family? Because Miss Xie just said that Miss Gu is also your cousin. Then Miss Gu and I are also cousins, so you should also be related to the Qin family? Luo Piapiao tilted her head and spoke much more freely. Luo Yaozu also nodded vigorously. Brother Qin couldn't take it anymore. He only felt that the two of them had arranged to make a fool of themselves today, so he shouldn't have agreed to bring them here. Miss Gu's father and Miss Xie's mother are biological siblings, so they are also cousins. They are closer than Miss Gu and Piapiao's cousins. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said, Miss Xie's foot injury isn't particularly serious, but it's not light either. Remember to apply the medicine on time and don't do any intense exercise for 3 weeks. Xie Qingying nodded. Thank you, Dr. Qin. Sorry for the trouble. She then asked Xiao Li, did you send a car to send Dr. Qin back? Snowing? Dr. Qin shook his head and said aloofly, I came by helicopter. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to arrive so quickly in such heavy snow. Luo Piapiao quickly said, yes, we came by helicopter from the Qin family's private hospital. Actually, Brother Qin also knows how to fly a helicopter. Oh? Dr. Qin completely ignored her and only nodded at Gunyanji. He greeted her, I'm Qin Haoshan, the second son of the Qin family. I'm ranked 4th. Your mother is my aunt. His father and Qin Yaoguang were cousins. Gunyanji smiled. Hello, Mr. Qin. She didn't call him cousin. Qin Haoshan was a little unhappy, but when he thought about how Gunyanji had even sued her own mother, he couldn't expect her to be nice to her relatives. He quickly felt relieved and said, Uncle wants to invite you back for the new year this year. I wonder if you agreed? Gunyanji raised her eyebrows in surprise and spread her hands. Is that so? I had no idea. Maybe I didn't have time to inform you. Qin Haoshan quickly said, I was being too nosy. Please don't take offense. It's fine, it's fine. I won't go so far as to make things difficult for someone over such a small matter. Gunyanji smiled and raised her glass of milk at him. But since you said it, help me reject it. You don't have to send me an invitation, and you don't have to inform me because I won't be going to the Qin family for the new year. Huh. Cousin Gu, think about it before you say anything. Luo Piapiao was anxious. The old man rarely invites people home for the new year. You should cherish this opportunity. If you want it, I'll give it to you. Gunyanji said without hesitation, I'll be very busy during the new year and don't want to go anywhere. Qin Haoshan saw that Gunyanji was determined and there were many people here. It was not convenient for him to speak up for old Master Qin, so he didn't say anything else. He looked down at his watch and said, okay, I'll bear the consequences if I talk too much. I'll explain it to Uncle. With that, he opened the medicine box and took out a bag of homemade medicine for Xie Qingying. Miss Xie, he said politely, you'll get better faster with this. Xie Qingying took it with a smile. I've troubled Dr. Qin today. Actually, I just sprained my ankle. There's no need to trouble Dr. Qin. Qin Haoshan was an expert in orthopedics at the Qin family's private hospital. It was a great favor for him to come and see a small sprain. Qin Haoshan looked at Xie Qingying intently, and his voice involuntarily softened. It's okay. They're all patients. I'll treat them equally. Gunyanji looked at Dr. Qin with interest. She thought to herself, if the affection in your eyes when you look at Cousin Xie isn't so obvious, I really would believe you. Qin Haoshan left with the Luo siblings. Xie Qingying was called over by her best friend to meet her friend. Yijichu stayed at the bar counter with Gunyanji. The glass of red wine in his hand was just for show, but he didn't drink it. Gunyanji coveted the red wine in Yijichu's hand and really wanted to taste it. However, Yijichu knew that her eyes were almost intoxicated, so he didn't let her taste it. He waved his hand and asked for a glass of red grape juice for her. He said, drink it. It's the same taste. To hell with the same taste. Gunyanji was secretly displeased, but she still took the red grape juice. As she took a sip, she whispered, young master, Cousin Xie is very popular. If you don't hurry up, that Dr. Qin will snatch her away. Yijichu spun his wine glass nonchalantly and said lazily, if it's mine, I won't be able to snatch it away. If it's not mine, I won't be able to keep it. What's the point? He glanced at Gunyanji with a faint smile in his sparkling almond-shaped eyes. He said, I have a Buddhist attitude towards this kind of thing now. I'm glad I got it. If not, my life. This was today's second update, Chapter 1633, Buddhist Attitude. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1645. I'm lucky to have it. Not my life. Gunyanji muttered and shook her head. Negative to negative. You'll lose those little sisters who truly love you like this. If she had thought that way back then, she would never have had the chance to be with Major General Hua. Yijichu was amused by Gunyanji's serious expression. He gently rubbed her head and said with a half-smile, if someone who truly loves me gives up so easily, then it wouldn't be considered sincere. Don't mind my business. If you care so much about me, be careful that you won't be able to get rid of me again. Gunyanji, then we can't even be normal friends anymore? Gunyanji sat up straight and frowned. If even the concern between friends can be misunderstood, then what's the point? What happened to treating me like a sister? Hijichu retracted his hand and smiled self-deprecatingly. He regained his cold and aloof expression and said aloofly, "Then can't we even joke around as normal friends? If a joke has to be taken seriously, then we shouldn't be friends anymore. As for siblings, if you're willing to call me brother, I'll naturally protect you for the rest of your life." When Gunyenji heard Hijichu say that, she seemed to be angry. She also wondered if she had gone too far just now. It was clearly just a joke. Gunyenji didn't want Hijichu to be angry. She held her red grape juice with both hands and lowered her head in embarrassment. "Young master, I was wrong." Hijichu didn't expect Gunyenji to apologize directly. He stared at her in a daze for a while, and a smile appeared on his face. It was like the spring breeze blowing across the surface of the ice. There were still ice shards in the ripples, but he still smiled in the end. However, his sparkling almond-shaped eyes were dead silent. Hijichu raised his head and drank the cocktail in his hand in one gulp. He placed the empty glass on the bar counter and gestured for the bartender to bring him another glass of red wine. He patted Gunyenji's head. "Good, you even know how to apologize. I didn't dote on you for nothing. Brother, he is the best." She looked up at Hijichu's cold profile and smiled sweetly. She was like a little kitten that had done something wrong and was trying to act cute to get away with it. Her big black eyes were bright and watery, and all that was missing was a soft cat tail wagging around. Hijichu couldn't be angry at that smiling face no matter what. At this moment he smiled again. This time, his smile reached the bottom of his eyes, like sunlight, breaking through the dead silence in his peach blossom eyes. The bartender looked at Hijichu, then at Gunyenji. He shook his head without batting an eyelid. He made Hijichu a cocktail with a higher alcohol content and placed it next to his glass of red wine. Hijichu saw this but didn't say anything. He picked up the red wine and drank it first. Not long after, more and more people gathered around Hijichu. They greeted him and talked about things. They could also greet Gunyenji. They were all elites among elites. They chatted at the right time and didn't make Gunyenji feel out of place, nor did they make her feel left out. It was as if she was also old friends with them. There was a sense of harmony that made her feel at home. Gunyenji was also a very talkative person. She had met many important people over the years with Wuxia, so she didn't have stage fright and could talk about all kinds of topics. In addition, these people all avoided the topic of the Qin family and Qin Yaoguang, so Gunyenji didn't feel embarrassed or stuck. However, the side effect was that Gunyenji couldn't find out anything related to the Qin family at all. This could be considered a blessing in disguise. If Hijichu hadn't been watching from the side, Gunyenji believed that she would have been able to dig up more information related to the Qin family. Unfortunately, he clearly didn't like Qin Yaoguang and didn't want to have anything to do with the Qin family. His childhood friends knew what he meant, so they naturally wouldn't offend him. Gunyenji chatted and laughed for a while, then gradually fell silent. Because most of the people here were men, it was a little inappropriate for a woman like her to be stuck in the middle. The living room happened to be in two circles with Hijichu and Xie Qingying as the center. One circle was mainly made up of men, and the other was mainly made up of women. Gunyenji was feeling bored when Xie Qingying saw her. She quickly helped her best friend over and waved at her with a smile. "Nyenji, come and have a chat with your cousin. Our cousins need to get to know each other better." Gunyenji's eyes lit up. She thought that women were the best at gossiping. Going to Xie Qingying's place to chat with those women should be more rewarding. She quickly looked at Hijichu and said, "Young master, I'll go talk to cousin Xie?" Hijichu glanced over and was a little hesitant. "Are you okay? You only know Xie Qingying over there." "It's okay. I'll know her when I get there." Gunyenji smiled and jumped down from the high chair. She turned around and waved at Hijichu. "All right, young master, you talk. I'll be right back." She skipped over to Xie Qingying and said, "Cousin Xie, don't come over. Your foot hasn't healed yet." Xie Qingying stopped in her tracks and waited for her to pass. She held her hand and returned to their circle. She let Gunyenji sit next to her and introduced her to her friends. Gunyenji, a very capable lawyer. Even if you haven't met her before, you've heard of her name, right? She's very young. She's only 20. The women who could be friends with Xie Qingying all had similar personalities as her, so they all nodded at Gunyenji and said, "I've long heard of your famous name." Gunyenji giggled and said, "Ladies, don't mock me. I'm new here. If I accidentally offend you, you must tell me. I'll apologize immediately." Her lively and cute attitude quickly won the favor of Xie Qingying's friends. Everyone started chatting. Xie Qingying listened with a smile. After a while, she clapped her hands and said, "It's almost time. Let's go out for a barbecue and enjoy the snow." Sure. I heard that there's authentic venison today, and there's a copper wire cover. Everyone can try roasting it like the venison in the dream. Xie Qingying's best friend was the first to stand up. She then turned around and carefully helped Xie Qingying up. Gunyanji couldn't help but think of Ma Qiqi when she saw how close the two of them were. She also had good friends, but unfortunately they were now far apart. Gunyanji turned around to look in He Jichu's direction. She was a little depressed. Xie Qingying immediately sensed it. She didn't say anything and whispered to her best friend to bring everyone to the barbecue pavilion outside. She fell behind and walked slowly with Gunyanji. Qin Haoshan gave her a walking stick that could shrink into a small wooden stick. It could support half of her body weight. Gunyanji slowed down when she saw this. She held Xie Qingying's arm and whispered, "Cousin Xie, don't blame me for talking too much, but it's really not suitable to wear these high-heeled boots on such a snowy day. Not to mention climbing a mountain even on flat ground, the road might freeze after the snow. If they weren't careful they might fall to the ground." Xie Qingying smiled bitterly and said, "Since you said that, I'll be honest. I'm wearing these clothes for young Master He. I'm only 1.65 meters tall, so I'm not as tall as you. If I'm not tall enough, I won't be able to hold up this dress coat. So even if it's snowing heavily, I still can't help wearing high-heeled boots." To put it bluntly, a woman would dress up for the person she liked. Gunyanji suddenly understood and quickly nodded. I understand. Cousin Xie is so beautiful, so she looks good no matter what she wears. It's not like young Master He doesn't have eyes. You can see." Xie Qingying pursed her lips and smiled shyly, but she still mustered up the courage to say, "Nianji, you really don't like young Master He? I don't mean anything else. If you still like him, I definitely won't get involved between the two of you." Gunyanji was also a magnanimous person. Seeing that Xie Qingying had said it clearly, she admired her and felt that she liked her even more. She turned around and glanced at He Jichu. Seeing that he had also brought his group of friends out, she laughed softly and said, "Cousin Xie, I'll tell you the truth. I've always treated young Master He as my brother. In the past, engagement was done by my parents' generation. Do you know how old I was back then? How could I have feelings for young Master He?" "Really?" Xie Qingying's heart was pounding. She looked at Gunyanji intently. She saw that Gunyanji's smile was bright and her expression was calm. She didn't look like she was pretending at all. Although she was young, she had been in the new media industry for several years. She was best at reading people's expressions. Xie Qingying believed that Gunyanji was sincere. Gunyanji nodded heavily. "Why would I lie to you? I'll also tell you that there are many women who like young Master He, but at the moment, only Cousin Xie's overall qualities are the most outstanding. At least she was much better than Wen Shui, who clearly had a crush on He Jichu but didn't dare to say it out loud." Gunyanji thought about how Wen Shui had harbored evil intentions towards her in the other world and took it to heart. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1634, A Woman Dresses Up for the Person She Likes. A reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets. There were 3 updates today. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the monthly ticket was 2,500 plus updates. There was a third update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1646. Everything that had happened in the other world related to Wen Shui flashed through her mind. Gunyanji's eyes flashed with a hint of killing intent when she thought of Luo Piapiao, whom she had just met. Xie Qingying was immersed in her own thoughts. She sighed and said, "But that's not how relationships are calculated. Just because your conditions are better than others doesn't mean you can get what you want." Gunyanji glanced at Xie Qingying and said seriously, "But from a biological point of view, choosing a mate is a process of competing for seniority. For normal animals, when males are courting, they will show off their advantages. For example, their feathers are prettier than other peacocks, or their combat power is stronger than other lions. Human society is no exception." Xie Qingying was amused by her and nodded. Yes, human society is no exception. Otherwise, why would this be an era where looks are important? That's right. Gunyanji clasped her hands together and smiled. "Cousin Xie, you're beautiful, capable, and magnanimous. You're obviously a virtuous woman. You're the most suitable person to marry and be the wife of the family." Xie Qingying laughed so hard that she couldn't walk. "I'm not as good as you say I am." She shook her head. "I actually have a temper too. I have my own temper. She paused and continued, but the most important thing is that the person I like isn't someone who only looks at looks. If that's really the case, then it'll be easy. Whether it was family background, ability, figure, or looks, Xie Qingying didn't have an advantage over Hijichu. Therefore, she didn't have much confidence and was often worried about gains and losses. Gunyinji was young after all. Although she had a high IQ, she didn't have enough experience. She asked in confusion, "Cousin Xie, do you really like young Master He?" "Of course." Xie Qingying looked at her and said very sincerely, "I've only loved him in my life." "That's enough. Why do you want so much? Just go after him." Gunyinji patted her shoulder and smiled. "Although I won't say anything for you in front of young Master He, I hope you won't just have a crush on him. You have to take action." Xie Qingying held her hand emotionally. "Nianji, I didn't expect you to understand relationships so well at such a young age." "Of course I understand." Gunyinji pursed her lips and chuckled, but she wouldn't share her experience chasing Huaxiao with anyone because it was too frustrating. Shameful. Did she not want her pride? However, Xie Qingying said, "Actually, I don't want you to say anything for me in front of young Master He. Don't say anything good or bad." Gunyinji nodded solemnly. "Absolutely not." She understood what Xie Qingying meant. Because Xie Qingying wanted a complete relationship, this relationship should not be mixed with any other factors. If Gunyinji put in a good word for Xie Qingying in front of Hijichu, Xie Qingying wouldn't be sure if Hijichu liked her because Gunyinji made him like her, or if he truly loved her from the bottom of his heart. To put it bluntly, Xie Qingying wanted a natural relationship in marriage, not to get together with Hijichu for the sake of marriage. What was rare was that Gunyinji understood everything. Xie Qingying believed that Gunyinji wouldn't interfere. She looked ahead and calmly said, "Don't worry, I won't give up without trying once. To tell you the truth, I've had a crush on young Master He for a long time." Gunyinji suddenly felt the same way. Looking at Xie Qingying, it was as if she was looking at herself back then, when she was 15 or 16 years old and had her first awakening of love. She couldn't help holding Xie Qingying's hand and said, "Cousin Xie, if you really like young Master He, then work hard to fight for him. Young Master He is really a very good person. He deserves your love. Fight for him." Xie Qingying smiled and imitated Gunyinji's tone of voice. "Thank you for your encouragement. I'll work hard." After the two of them spoke, they felt even closer to each other, as if they had a common secret. They walked along the stone path that had been swept clean and sprinkled with coarse salt. Before they could see the pavilion in front of them, they could already smell the aroma of barbecue. Gunyinji took a deep breath and became fascinated. "I'm hungry." Hijichu, who had caught up from behind, heard this and quickly said, "You can't eat too much even if you're hungry. There's a cold wind outside, and the pavilion for the barbecue is open on all sides. If you blow in the cold wind and press some hot barbecue on top of it, you'll have a stomachache when you go back." Hijichu's friends around him were so shocked that their eyes almost fell out. This young Master He was still as caring for Miss Gu as he was when she was young. But she was already 20 years old, not 6 years old. Was it really good to be so controlling? Of course, everyone was just watching from the sidelines. No one dared to say it out loud. When Xie Qingying saw this, she became even more determined. That was, between her and Hijichu, Gunyinji really couldn't do anything, not even to help her. She could tell that Gunyinji still had a great influence on Hijichu. Hijichu had been circling around Gunyinji for so many years. He probably hadn't completely let go of her for a while. She could understand that. Gunyinji was extremely angry, and her temper was especially bad when she was hungry. However, seeing that she was surrounded by Hijichu's friends, she resisted the urge to flare up. However, she strode into the pavilion alone. Hijichu nodded at Xie Qingying and said, "Qingying, walk slowly. Although there's salt on the road, there might still be ice flows. I'll go check on Yanji. This little girl has a bad temper when she's hungry. Please bear with her." It's fine, it's fine." Xie Qingying was overwhelmed by the favor. Her fair face instantly turned red. She stammered, You should quickly go after Nianji. She's young, but don't scold her. She won't be happy if you scold her in front of so many people." Ijichu smiled. "Okay, I got it." With that, he also strode forward and quickly caught up to Gunyenji. He pulled her to a leeward seat in the barbecue pavilion. Although he didn't want her to eat too much, he still picked a plate of venison that had been roasted long ago and sent it to her. He apologized. "Don't be angry. I was in the wrong just now. Take this barbecue as my apology." Gunyenji's anger dissipated when she saw the fragrant roasted venison. There was a professional barbecue chef in the barbecue pavilion. Of course they could also roast it themselves, but that was a waste of food compared to the meat roasted by the barbecue chef. Gunyenji took a big bite of the roasted venison. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. When she ate it, it was filled with fragrant gravy and awakened all her taste buds. Not to mention that she was already hungry, so she finished the entire plate of barbecue in big bites. Hijichu was afraid that she wouldn't be able to digest too much barbecue, so he went to the barbecue chef to get some washed organic lettuce and wrapped the barbecue in lettuce for her to eat. This was another way to eat it. The fresh taste of the lettuce could relieve the greasy feeling, and it was just right to eat with the barbecue. It was also paired with some small tomatoes the size of marbles. They had just been roasted and were still warm. The visual impact of the red and green colors, coupled with the almost golden barbecue, made Gunyenji eat heartily. She wanted nothing more than to pull out all her fingers. Hijichu saw that Gunyenji was eating so happily, and even he had an appetite. He hadn't eaten properly for several days. At this time he also ate a large plate of meat wrapped in lettuce, 2 boiled potatoes and a few roasted tomatoes. He was only half full. Xie Qingying watched attentively from the side. Seeing that he still wanted more, she thought about it for a moment and quietly instructed the barbecue chef to specially roast a piece of medium well organic beef for Hijichu. He didn't use black pepper. He purely relied on the texture of the high-quality organic beef to enhance the taste. The small bamboo shoots and crab mushrooms that had just been taken out of the cold storage were used as side dishes. The barbecue chef carefully roasted this steak that was comparable to Wagyu beef. He placed it on a plate, ordered the side dishes and sent it to Hijichu. Hijichu raised his eyebrows and asked, "I didn't order steak, did I?" Xie Qingying walked over and smiled. "I asked the chef to roast it. You don't look full." Hijichu could indeed eat more. He looked at Xie Qingying and smiled. "Thank you. I want to eat more." "Okay, then take your time. I'll go over there first." Xie Qingying tried her best to suppress the joy in her heart and limped away with her walking stick. Gunyenji secretly glanced at Xie Qingying's back and wisely didn't say anything. Hijichu dragged over the plate with the steak. Seeing that Gunyenji's gaze was constantly on his steak, he picked up his knife and fork and said nonchalantly, "Just say what you want to say." Gunyenji had already decided not to say anything else about Xie Qingying because she didn't want to affect Hijichu in any way, whether it was good or bad. She still felt that their relationship could only be handled by themselves. Seeing that Hijichu had keenly sensed her thoughts, Gunyenji quickly changed the topic. "Young Master don't you think that Luo Piapiao looks like someone?" "Luo Piapiao? Who does she look like?" Hijichu didn't seem to realize this at all. "You really don't think she looks familiar?" Gunyenji was surprised. Was she the only one who noticed? "I don't think so. In my eyes they all look the same. All of their faces are blurry." Hijichu shook his head disapprovingly. This is today's second monthly ticket, 3,000 plus updates. Chapter 1635, The Age of Looking at Faces. Reminder of the recommendation votes. There will be a third update at 8 p.m. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1647. Gunyenji was speechless. After a while she said resentfully, "I'm just wondering if she looks like someone. It's not like I'm asking you to marry her. Why are you saying this?" Hijichu saw that she was being very cautious, so he focused and thought about it. However, the impression Luo Piapiao had given him just now was too blurry. He only remembered a face like a silver plate. It was quite white, but it made her face look even bigger. "Who do you think she looks like?" Hijichu couldn't think of anyone, so he could only use a little trick from court debate to get her started. Gunyenji knew it very well. She smiled at Hijichu and tilted her head. "Do you really want me to say? She looks a little like your former personal secretary and teaching assistant, Ms. Wenshui." Hijichu frowned. "Do they look alike? Why don't I think so at all?" In his heart, Wenshui still looked more like Gunyenji when she was young. As for Luo Piapiao, apart from her round face, he couldn't think of anything similar to Wenshui. Gunyenji frowned. Was she really overthinking things? She was a little regretful that she hadn't taken a photo of Luo Piapiao just now. "Maybe I'm overthinking things." Gunyenji hesitated as she took a bite of the barbecue. "If there's a chance, let them stand together and observe them carefully." Hijichu put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "If you think they look alike, there'll definitely be a chance to let them stand together for you to see in the future. However, don't prejudge your position and don't have a preconceived view. This will make your view not objective. Gunyinji nodded profusely and smiled. Got it, Professor He. Hijichu's lips curled into a faint smile, but he shot her a warning glance and shook his head slightly. He had been a professor in the other world, but he had never been a professor in this world. Gunyinji looked up at the sky in embarrassment, thinking that she had really gotten carried away. What she didn't know was that just that morning, another tenant had moved into Gunyinji's apartment complex. It was the deputy chief consul of the Soviet Union in Sea City, Peter, who was also Hua Xiaoheng. He didn't have much luggage and he had rented a well-decorated repair room that could be moved in with a bag. Therefore, he had brought 2 consulate staff members to pack for the entire morning. Mr. Deputy Chief Counsel, are you really going to stay here? The consulate staff who helped him move the things was a Soviet and also his subordinate. Hua Xiaoheng walked around the house and scanned the surroundings with the surveillance detector. After confirming that there were no surveillance cameras or pinhole cameras, he turned around and said, "Yeah, I have some personal matters to attend to. It's more convenient to stay here." The 2 staff members knew that their unbelievably handsome and single deputy chief counsel had taken a fancy to a Chinese woman and was trying his best to woo her. The 2 of them looked at each other and winked. "Mr. Deputy Chief Consul, we wish you all the best." Hua Xiaoheng looked at them and smiled. "Thank you for your auspicious words." After cleaning up the house, Hua Xiaoheng took the 2 staff members out for a meal before sending them away. Looking at his watch, it was already past noon. Gunyinji should be up by now, right? He tried calling Gunyinji again last night and discovered that she had secretly removed him from the blacklist, but she still didn't pick up. Hua Xiaoheng took out his phone and dialed Gunyinji's number as he walked straight to her apartment building. Still no one picked up. Hua Xiaoheng made several calls in a row, but all of them went to voicemail. He had no choice but to call Lu Yuan, who was his uncle, Hua Guanyuan. For the sake of safety, the 2 of them would still call each other Peter and President Lu for the time being. Lu Yuan heard his phone ring. He took it over and saw that it was Hua Xiaoheng's number. He immediately picked it up and asked, "Mr. Peter, what's the matter?" Hua Xiaoheng leaned against the mahogany door of the apartment building and looked at the snow in front of him. "President Lu, is Nianji home?" Lu Yuan laughed. "Are you looking for Nianji? Unfortunately, she's not here. Where can she go in such heavy snow? Did Lu Jin accompany her?" Hua Xiaoheng frowned slightly, and his unbelievably handsome face revealed a look of surprise. "Ah, Lu Jin? Do you think he has that kind of brain?" "Of course not. It was young Master He who took Nianji to Xiangshan to enjoy the snow." Lu Yuan deliberately explained in detail. "You know Xiangshan, right? There's a fragrant snow sea plum garden in Xiangshan. When it snows in winter, the plum blossoms are covered in snow. It's really beautiful. She actually went to enjoy the snow and she went with Hijichu." Hua Xiaoheng's expression darkened. "When I came, I saw that there was still snow in many places on the road. Are you sure you want her to go out in a car? She doesn't have to take a car. Young Master He drove a helicopter over to invite her," Lu Yuan said with a smile. Imagining Hua Xiaoheng's expression, he wished he could turn on the video call and let him enjoy the snow. Hua Xiaoheng hung up the phone and looked expressionlessly at the property management staff who had come to sweep the snow in front of the apartment building. His hands were itching. He wanted to smoke, but he couldn't smoke here because the ace of the Far East was someone who never smoked. People who smoked often had a strong or faint smell of smoke on them. As the most mysterious KGB spy, the ace of the Far East couldn't let people smell him before he even came out. Therefore he couldn't smoke either. He stood at the foot of Gunyinji's apartment for a while, then turned on his phone to look at the time. It was already past 2 in the afternoon. He continued to call Gunyinji, but she still didn't answer. Hua Xiaoheng was angry and amused at the same time. He stuffed his phone into his pocket and decided to look for her. He first went back to the Soviet consulate in China and asked for a JZ-3937 medium-sized off-road jeep. This was an off-road vehicle equipped with the Soviet Army. It could be said to be a light armored vehicle. It could cross trenches with tracks, and it could also transform the vehicle into a boat and drive on the water just like an amphibious vehicle. The appearance of this vehicle was very similar to the Hummer in the United States, but it was taller, stronger, and sturdier than the Hummer. It was especially suitable for traveling in heavy snow. In the Soviet Union, it was often equipped for the Siberian ground troops. Hua Xiaoheng was tall and strong to begin with, so he was a perfect match for this off-road jeep, which had a roof that was taller than a normal off-road vehicle. He was wearing a Soviet-style colonel's military coat and a purple mink fur cap on his head. It highlighted his unbelievably handsome facial features and added a hint of domineering aura. The distance from their apartment to Xiangshan wasn't considered close, but it definitely wasn't far either. Although Hua Xiaoheng didn't have a helicopter, there were basically no pedestrians or cars on the road at this time, except for snowplows. He drove the Jizzy 3937 as fast as lightning, and it only took him 20 minutes to reach the foot of Fragrant Mountain. He didn't expect that he couldn't drive up the mountain. This was because the only road at the foot of the mountain that had been cleared of snow was actually blocked. It was said that there was an important event on the mountain and they had to clear the road to ensure smooth traffic on the mountain. A few young men and women also stopped at the intersection in their off-road vehicles. A fair-skinned woman with a face like a silver plate complained, "We just came down from above. It's only been a while, why don't you let us go up?" This woman was Luo Piapiao, who had left with Qin Haoshan. The person beside her, who was wearing a down jacket and wanted to wrap himself into a ball, was her second brother Luo Yaozu. This was the third watch of the day, chapter 1636, close to you, close to me. To remind everyone of the recommendation votes. Moi, everyone little angels. Chapter 1648. Luo Yaozu had been pushed over by Luo Piapiao. He liked Gunyanji's appearance, but Hijichu beside Gunyanji was too scary. Luo Yaozu instinctively didn't dare to go closer. However, Luo Piapiao refused to give up. She could sense that Gunyanji seemed to be quite interested in the siblings. Only a fool would not take advantage of such a rare opportunity. Besides, she had ulterior motives. She had pushed her second brother Luo Yaozu to be her shield because she wanted to get closer to Hijichu. She knew herself well enough to know that she would never marry Hijichu. However, as long as she could be Hijichu's girlfriend or even his bed partner, there would be countless benefits in the future. Moreover, Hijichu was shockingly attractive to women. If she could be Hijichu's partner in bed, then she would be in luck. In fact, there were many women who thought like her. Weighing their own status, they knew that marriage was impossible, but if they could have something with such a handsome and charming man, even if there were no other benefits, it would be a lifelong memory. Luo Piapiao had made up her mind to start with Gunyanji. However, the guards at the foot of the mountain refused to let them go up. She tried everything she could to persuade them but to no avail. They had been begging here for half a day and had used all kinds of methods, but those people were stubborn and refused to bend the rules. "What's wrong with you guys? I'm a relative of the Qin family. My auntie Qin was once young Master He's stepmother and Miss Gu's biological mother. Miss Gu is on the mountain. Help me call her and tell her that Luo Piapiao and Luo Yaozu are here to look for her." Luo Piapiao thought about it and could only bring up Gunyanji. "You know Miss Gu, right? She used to be young Master He's fiancée, but now she's young Master He's sister." Even if the guards at the foot of the mountain didn't know Gunyanji, they definitely knew Hijichu. Hijichu was the one who had set up the security today. When he heard that it was related to his immediate superior, the guard hesitated for a moment. In the end, he picked up the walkie-talkie and contacted Hijichu's orderly in the fragrant snow sea of plum gardens on the mountain. "Is he looking for Miss Gu? Wait a minute, I'll go ask Miss Gu." Hijichu's orderlies didn't dare to delay and quickly went to the barbecue pavilion to find Hijichu and Gunyanji. He saluted Hijichu first, then said to Gunyanji, who was sitting next to Hijichu, "Miss Gu, there's a young lady named Luo Piapiao at the foot of the mountain. She said she was looking for Miss Gu." Hijichu was about to refuse when Gunyanji exclaimed in surprise, "Luo Piapiao and Luo Yaozu? Great, let them come up. Why are they so happy? Are they really good friends with Miss Gu?" Hijichu's orderly couldn't help but look at Hijichu inquiringly. Hijichu nodded thoughtfully. "I'll listen to Miss Gu." "Yes, Chief." Hijichu's orderly saluted again and turned to deliver the message. When the guards at the foot of the mountain received a call from the orderly, they quickly pulled open the fence and let them in. Hua Xiaoheng had already parked his off-road jeep far away. While these people were arguing with the guards, he had already quietly circled to the back of the mountain and strolled around the mountain path that hadn't been cleared of snow. Although he had never been to Fragrant Mountain on this side, there were troops stationed at the foot of Fragrant Mountain in the other world. They knew the terrain of Fragrant Mountain very well. Since both worlds had Fragrant Mountain, and the appearance was exactly the same, the mountain path should also be the same. Hua Xiaoheng used his memory to investigate the surrounding situation and found Xiang Shuahai's location on his phone. It was actually quite close to his direction. Those people had to take a long detour to reach the entrance of Fragrant Snow Sea Plum Garden. After walking in the snow for a while, Hua Xiaoheng used pebbles to catch 2 fat grouse and a round, grayish-black mountain rabbit. He also caught a pheasant with a bright color of fur. He easily carried the 2 ptarmigan, a rabbit and a pheasant down the mountain. He returned to his off-road jeep and took out his phone to text Gunyanji. Gunyanji was planning to wait for Luo Piapiao and the others to arrive so that she could get some information out of them when she suddenly felt her phone vibrate. She took it out and glanced at it. Her eyebrows twitched slightly. King of Drama. Lawyer Gu, are you in Fragrant Snow Sea? I'm also at the foot of Fragrant Mountain. I just caught 2 ptarmigan, a rabbit and a pheasant. Gunyanji then received a few photos. She looked at the round ptarmigan and rabbit squatting on the ground, looking at her with big black and innocent eyes. Gunyanji swallowed her saliva disappointingly. He was too cunning. He was actually tempting her with delicacies. Gunyanji hesitated for a moment, but decided to eat first as a sign of respect. She pretended to reply to Hua Xiaoheng's text. A series of ellipses were left unsaid. Hua Xiaoheng curled his lips. He knew she wouldn't be able to resist these wild animals. Leaning against the door of the off-road jeep, Hua Xiaoheng stretched his long legs and continued texting. King of Drama, do you want to eat? Gunyanji. The 3 huge exclamation marks expressed her surging emotions. King of Drama. Unfortunately, I don't know how to make it and I can't go up the mountain to give it to you. Then I can only release it. Gunyanji quickly replied, don't release it. Hurry up and send it up the mountain. She jumped up from Hijichu's side and found the orderly from before. She said, I still have a friend at the foot of the mountain who brought me game. Ask the people down there to let him go. Kimisku. The orderly quickly picked up the walkie-talkie. May I know your friend's name? His name is Peter. He's from the Soviet Union. Gunyanji thought about it and said Hua Xiaoheng's name here. When the orderly heard that he was from the Soviet Union, he quickly said, then I'll ask young Master He. Gunyanji nodded silently and followed him back to Hijichu's side. Peter? Did he bring you some game? Hijichu took a sip of red wine and smiled lazily. Okay, let him come up. It's rare for a Soviet diplomat to personally bring us game. It's a waste not to eat it. The orderly received the order and immediately used the walkie-talkie to contact the foot of the mountain to let them go. The guard at the foot of the mountain looked around for a long time. Finally, he confirmed that Hua Xiaoheng was the Peter that young Master He and Miss Gu had mentioned based on the 2 grouse, a rabbit and a pheasant at his feet. He was wearing a Soviet military uniform, and the sable inside and outside military cap on his head was also the style of the Soviet Red Army. He was even more convinced. Are you Mr. Peter? The guard at the foot of the mountain walked over and saluted. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and said coldly, can I go up now? Yes, please. The guard quickly opened the fence and watched Hua Xiaoheng return to his tall off-road jeep. He quickly drove up the winding mountain road. When he used his superb driving skills to drive to the entrance of Xiangshua Hai Meiyuan, Luo Piapiao and the other's car was still crawling on the mountain road. May I ask who you are looking for? The guard at the door politely stopped Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng raised the game in his hand. I'm Peter. Miss Gu asked me to come up just now. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1637, We're all interested. A reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets. There would be a second update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1649. The guard at the door had already received the news and quickly made way for him. Mr. Peter, please come in. Hua Xiaoheng carried 2 grouse in one hand and a hare and pheasant in the other. He followed the aroma of barbecue to the barbecue pavilion. Gunyanji's heart was pounding but she maintained a calm expression. She sat motionless beside Hijichu and looked at the game in Hua Xiaoheng's hands. She pretended to be aloof and said, I didn't know Mr. Peter was such a good hunter. I often hunted in Siberia during the winter. It's just a small skill. It's not worth mentioning. Hua Xiaoheng's Chinese wasn't very fluent and sounded like a foreigner speaking Chinese. It was a perfect match for his identity. No wonder he was the king of dramas. Gunyanji was amazed and her eyes couldn't help falling on Hua Xiaoheng's flawless hands. She was momentarily distracted. She thought she would ask him who did his skincare when she returned to the other side. Hua Xiaoheng noticed Gunyanji's gaze on his hands and thought she was looking at the game in his hands. He was amused but his expression became even more aloof. Hijichu twirled the wine goblet in his hand playfully and looked up at the gray sky for a while. He ordered dryly, take the game Mr. Peter brought to the chef. The 2 grouse will be used as beggar's chicken, the hare will be roasted, and the pheasant will be made into pheasant soup. Leave the feathers and make a shuttlecock for Miss Gu to play with. Gu Nianji couldn't maintain her aloof expression when she heard this. She glared at He Jichu and said, I'm not a child. I don't play shuttlecock. But I want pheasant soup. The pheasant Mr. Peter brought is too old. Then roast it directly. He Jichu continued to order. Yes, chief. His orderly walked over and took the 4 game from Hua Xiaoheng's hands. Hua Xiaoheng walked to the barbecue pavilion and found a place to sit. As the host, He Jichu had to be polite and asked, what would Mr. Peter like to drink? Would you like a plate of roasted deer meat? Hua Xiaoheng rested one hand on the railing of the pavilion. His expression was very cold. No need. I'm waiting to eat the game I brought. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed and she took the opportunity to ask, actually, barbecue tastes better when you roast it yourself. Mr. Peter really doesn't want to try roasting it for us? No. Hua Xiaoheng rejected her without hesitation and said seriously, Miss Gu, it's a waste for people who don't know how to cook to force themselves to cook, and wasting food is shameful behavior. He Jichu snickered. Mr. Peter, I didn't know you loved food so much. But what are you doing here? What's the matter? Hua Xiaoheng glanced at Gu Nianji and saw that she was looking in the direction of the barbecue chef, but his ears were secretly perked up. He leaned in Gu Nianji's direction and said, I have something to do. I'll go after Miss Gu. Gu Nianji completely didn't expect Hua Xiaoheng to be bold enough to publicly confess his love. She didn't know how to respond, and the side of her face uncontrollably flushed. Her skin was already especially white and supple, full of collagen. Now that her cheeks were flushed, she looked like a rare flower that had just been born. The last trace of a young girl's childishness had faded, and she now had a bit of a mature woman's beauty. Hua Xiaoheng was momentarily dazed. He hadn't seen her for only a few months, but she had already grown up in places he couldn't see. He Jichu's hand tightly gripped the wine glass as he struggled to look away. He happened to see Xie Qingying walking over with a few women. He greeted them with relief. Qingying, Mr. Peter from the Soviet Consulate General is here. Xie Qingying smiled. I saw him over there so I came over. She looked in Hua Xiaoheng's direction and said enthusiastically, I didn't expect Mr. Peter to have time to come to our little gathering. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at the 2 shy women next to Xie Qingying and pointed directly at Gu Nianji. Yes, I'm here to go after her. The 2 women next to Xie Qingying immediately turned pale and stumbled back. They looked like they had fallen from heaven to hell and turned to run. Xie Qingying also didn't expect Mr. Peter to be so honest. She had a better impression of him. She limped over with her cane and stood next to He Jichu. She smiled at Hua Xiaoheng. Mr. Peter has good taste. Miss Gu used to be a raw jade, but now she's a fine piece of jade. It won't be easy to woo her. Gu Nianji's face turned even redder. She glared at Hua Xiaoheng, then laughed at Xie Qingying. Cousin Xie really knows how to tease people. Mr. Peter was just joking. Don't take it seriously. I'm serious, Hua Xiaoheng said seriously. In front of so many people, he said firmly, I like you and I'm going after you. Gu Nianji's heart was filled with sweetness and happiness, but she still had to keep a straight face. She couldn't let He Jichu think there was a problem. She stopped smiling and said lightly, I've said it many times. We're not suitable. Mr. Peter, don't waste your time with me. As she spoke, she stood up and walked out of the barbecue pavilion without looking at Hua Xiaoheng. At that moment, Luo Piapiao's group finally came in. Gu Nianji stood by the side of the road and waited for them. Luo Piapiao walked around looking around and almost missed Gu Nianji, who was standing by the side of the road. Luo Yaozu saw her and quickly went forward to please her. Miss Gu, what a coincidence. Luo Piapiao finally noticed Gu Nianji and took a step forward to hold her hand. Cousin Gu, were you waiting for us here? Yes. Gu Nianji tilted her head and no longer suppressed the smile on her face. Her smiling face was like a flower that had just bloomed. It was bright and clear and beautiful. Luo Yaozu's eyes widened. He felt that this Miss Gu was becoming more and more compatible with him. If this continued, he would really have to catch up to her. In a moment of lust, he mustered up his courage and followed closely by Gu Nianji's side. He took care of her and tried to get close to her. Miss Gu, where do you work? I heard you're a lawyer, right? Do you want to go to the 4 major law firms? I know a friend who's one of the partners of the 4 major law firms. He can help you get in. Gu Nianji chuckled and gave a perfunctory reply. She cleverly led the topic to his family, especially his mother. Mr. Luo's mother is Dean Qin's cousin? But I don't think I've heard Dean Qin mention it. Oh, my mother passed away many years ago. It's normal that Auntie Qin didn't mention it, Luo Yaozu said nonchalantly. She passed away? Gun Yinji was very disappointed. She hadn't expected that she would immediately cut off the lead she had just found. It seemed like she only had Luo Piapiao as her lead. Gun Yinji turned to look at Luo Piapiao, who was walking on her other side, only to see that she was already staring in the direction of the barbecue pavilion in a daze. Gun Yinji also looked up. At the barbecue booth, He Jichu and Hua Xiaoheng stood side by side in the booth, looking straight in their direction. The two of them were almost the same height. One was as elegant as the moon in the cold river, while the other was as cold as the icy spring in the mountains. In terms of appearance alone, Hua Xiaoheng was indeed more outstanding. Therefore Luo Piapiao, who had thought that she was thinking about young Master He, instantly fell under Hua Xiaoheng's military pants. However, He Jichu was no less attractive than Hua Xiaoheng, which was very rare. Gun Yinji was proud of how Hua Xiaoheng looked at first, but she couldn't bear to see other people staring at him. Seeing Luo Piapiao like this, Gun Yinji coughed and said, "Cousin Luo, wipe your saliva. It's almost flowing out." Luo Piapiao subconsciously wiped her chin. There was no saliva at all. Only then did she realize that Gun Yinji was teasing her. "Cousin Gu, you're so bad." Luo Piapiao's face flushed red. She suddenly bent down to grab a handful of snow from the roadside and threw it in Gun Yinji's direction. Gun Yinji quickly took a few steps back and dodged. Luo Yaozu happened to turn around. Luo Piapiao's handful of snow hit Luo Yaozu's face. Luo Yaozu screamed, "Luo Piapiao, I'm not done with you." He also bent down to grab a large handful of snow and threw it at Luo Piapiao. Luo Piapiao didn't run fast, so she shrank her neck and was hit by a ball of snow from Luo Yaozu. The cold snow seeped into the back of her neck, making her shiver. "Luo Yaozu." Luo Piapiao waved her hand angrily. "All of you attack." She and a few of her friends bent down to grab some snow and started a snowball fight. Gun Yinji watched with interest and joined their battle. Sometimes she was in the same group as Luo Yaozu, and sometimes she was in the same group as Luo Piapiao. She had a great time. The rich heirs who played with Luo Yaozu and Luo Piapiao were all hedonistic and were very good at eating, drinking and having fun. In order to get to know these two, Gun Yinji also had the intention to befriend them. After a snowball fight, Luo Piapiao had already treated her as a best friend. In the barbecue pavilion not far away, He Jichu crossed his arms and watched Gun Yinji have a snowball fight in the crowd. He said coldly, "Mr. Peter, don't waste any more time. Yinji won't accept you. It's her business whether she accepts it or not. It's my business whether I chase after her or not. There's no need for young Master He to worry." Hua Xiaoheng coldly rejected He Jichu. "You're too much older than her. You're not suitable for her." He Jichu smiled. "Look at how well she plays with her peers. I'm just reminding you. As for whether you accept it or not, of course that's your business." This was the second update of the day, Chapter 1638, I'm Here to Chase You. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1650. Hua Xiaoheng placed his hands on the railing in front of him and stared at the group of young men and women who were having a snowball fight. He said slowly, "If I remember correctly, when young Master He was engaged to Miss Gu, he didn't mind that he was much older than her, right?" He Jichu smiled faintly and said meaningfully, "That's why I broke off the engagement. I didn't want to delay the young lady from finding a suitable man for herself. As for you, can you be like those young men and women, disregarding your identity and status, and join them in a snowball fight?" He quickly looked at the man beside him, who was exactly the same as Hua Xiaoheng in the other world, but he also found many subtle differences. For example, this ace of the Far East, Peter, had a cold and distant personality. It was completely different from Major General Hua's calm and low-key personality. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't bring himself to say that he publicly wanted to pursue Gun Yinji. On the other hand, his father, He Qingjin, had to suspect that the ace of the Far East, Peter Hua Xiaoheng, was the Hua Xiaoheng over there. He had even set up a killing trap at all costs, but in the end he had not killed the ace of the Far East. Instead, he had almost killed Gun Yinji. He had even personally destroyed the last trace of hope between him and Gun Yinji. The light in He Jichu's eyes dimmed instantly. He stopped smiling and lowered his head to take a sip of wine. Hua Xiaoheng shrugged nonchalantly and said, "It's just a snowball fight. What's so difficult about it?" Do you believe that I can bury those men who dared to covet Miss Gu in the snow? He Jichu choked and glanced sideways at Hu Xiaoheng. You? As a Soviet diplomat, you want to have a snowball fight with those young people in their early 20s? The dignified KGB's ace of the Far East also had to get angry with these brats? Jichu only thought it was ridiculous. How could this person be the shrewd and scheming Special Operations Forces commander Hu Xiaoheng? He couldn't help but lament that his father was too paranoid. He had let Nianji suffer and suffer for nothing. He doted on Gu Nianji so much that sometimes even he couldn't tell what kind of feelings he had for her that made him miss her so much. But the moment Gu Nianji stopped breathing in his arms, he knew what he had to do. No matter what kind of feelings he had for her, he should extinguish all of them. In his heart, nothing was more important than Gu Nianji's life. As long as she was still alive and kicking in this world and could happily have a snowball fight with others, he would be satisfied. On the snow in front of her, Gu Nianji seemed to be having a good time. She even took out her phone and called for Luo Piapiao and a few of her friends to come over. She raised her phone to take a selfie. Luo Piapiao's friend had brought a selfie stick with her and quickly ran to get it. Holding Gu Nianji's camera, a group of young people put on cute expressions and postures in front of the camera. Luo Yaozu even sneaked up behind Gu Nianji and hugged her with both hands to take a photo with her. Of course he didn't touch Gu Nianji. He was at least a meter away from her and only pretended to hug her from behind. When Hu Xiaoheng saw this, he snorted and said with arrogance and disdain, "Can't I have a snowball fight? This is the only way I can show my sincerity in pursuing Miss Gu." As he said that, he used one hand to support himself on the railing of the pavilion and jumped over it. Jumping down from the barbecue pavilion, Hu Xiaoheng quickly arrived at the snowball fight. Gu Nianji and the others had just finished taking a photo when the snowball fight started again. Hu Xiaoheng found Gu Nianji and said with a smile, "Come, I'll team up with you. Let's beat them up." Gu Nianji had just dodged a handful of snow from Luo Piapiao. She turned around and saw Hu Xiaoheng coming. He even grabbed a handful of snow in his hand, as if he wanted to have a snowball fight with her. Gu Nianji was so shocked that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. Her mind was blank, and she didn't realize that Luo Yaozu was throwing a handful of snow at her. Seeing this, Hu Xiaoheng pulled her behind him and threw the snowball that he had just rolled up into a ball with a backhand. The handful of snow that Luo Yaozu threw hit Hu Xiaoheng's chest, but Hu Xiaoheng's snowball was as fast as the wind and powerful. It hit Luo Yaozu's face with a loud bang. Luo Yaozu cried out and was hit by the handful of snow until he fell on his back on the snow. The back of his head hit the hard ground and he couldn't get up for a long time. Luo Piapiao thought he was joking, so she ran over and kicked him. She smiled and said, "Second brother, get up quickly. They're coming." Luo Yaozu was seeing stars and he whimpered, "Piapiao, I can't take it anymore. I'm going blind and I have a headache. Help me find a doctor." With that, he vomited. Luo Piapiao was terrified. She quickly waved for him to stop and said anxiously, "My second brother is broken. We have to find a doctor." Gu Nianji poked her head out from behind Hu Xiaoheng and saw the situation on Luo Yaozu and Luo Piapiao's side. She was puzzled. What was going on? Hu Xiaoheng turned around and spread his hands at her. "It's just a snowball fight. I didn't expect him to be so fragile." "Fragile?" Gu Nianji's eyes widened. "What did you do?" The other person who had been having a snowball fight with them earlier whispered. "He almost knocked Yaozu out with a snowball. I think it's a concussion. Look, he's vomiting." Another person said in an even quieter voice, looking at Hu Xiaoheng with almost reverence. Gu Nianji really didn't know what to say. She glared at Hu Xiaoheng, then turned around and ran back to the barbecue pavilion. She whispered a few words to Hijichu. Hijichu laughed so hard that he almost couldn't straighten his back, but he still agreed to call a doctor for Luo Yaozu. He sent a few orderlies to carry Luo Yaozu to the small resting hall next to the manor hall and waited for the doctor to come and treat him. The rest of the people stopped having a snowball fight and followed him back to the hall. The barbecue chef simply moved the barbecue utensils to a small banquet hall. It was bright on all sides and they could also admire the snow and the plum blossoms. However, the view wasn't as wide as the barbecue pavilion. Xie Qingying limped over with her walking stick and asked about Luo Yaozu in a soft voice. Hijichu couldn't help laughing and teased, "Our Soviet diplomats are too powerful. No wonder they're a fighting people. They're even more valiant than others in a snowball fight." Gu Nianji followed Luo Piapiao to guard Luo Yaozu's side. She was very apologetic. She had only wanted to get to know the two of them so that she could ask them about the Qin family and Qin Yaoguang. She really hadn't expected Hua Xiaoheng to do such a dirty trick. Why hadn't she realized before that this person was so jealous? Even so, she was still very happy. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't happy that the person she loved cared so much about her. However, she still had to look angry on the surface. It was really miserable. Gunyinji admired the actors very much. Of course, she admired the soldiers fighting on the special front even more. They experienced this kind of discomfort all the time, but they didn't complain. Luo Yaozu lay on his side on the sofa. His head was dizzy and his chest felt nauseous. He wanted to vomit, but seeing that Gunyinji was beside him, he didn't want to make a fool of himself in front of a beautiful woman. He resisted the urge to vomit, and his pretty face turned snow-white. Luo Piapiao saw that Gunyinji had a worried expression on her face and seemed to be quite concerned about Luo Yaozu. She was secretly surprised and thought that there was actually someone who didn't like the Soviet diplomat who was so attractive at first sight. She only liked her second brother? Her eyes flashed and she pretended to say casually, "Cousin Gu, isn't that Soviet diplomat too powerful? He can knock someone unconscious with just a snowball. Will he be subjected to domestic violence in the future if he's with such a person?" Gunyinji came back to her senses and glanced at her. She deliberately said, "That's for sure. I heard that Soviet men like two things the most. One is drinking vodka and the other is beating their wives." The Soviet Hua Xiaoheng who had just walked over, Luo Piapiao saw the Soviet diplomat walking over from the corner of her eye. She immediately changed her expression and became shy. Hua Xiaoheng walked over and looked at Luo Yaozu carefully. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with him, he said to Gunyinji bluntly, "I moved to your apartment complex today. You didn't pick up my call, so I had no choice but to come here to look for you." Luo Piapiao was instantly discouraged. This person was chasing after Gunyinji so closely. How could anyone else have any hope? Luo Yaozu was about to vomit blood when he heard this. He suddenly felt dizzy and couldn't help but vomit again. Hua Xiaoheng immediately grabbed Gunyinji's shoulder with one hand and covered her eyes with the other. He almost forcefully pulled her away as he said, "This gentleman vomited when he saw you, and you still want to stay here and look at him?" Gunyinji was originally quite happy, but when Hua Xiaoheng said that, she was a little angry. "Why did he vomit when he saw me? He was fine just now, but he vomited when he saw you coming over." She pushed Hua Xiaoheng's hand away, but saw that he had already pulled her to the VIP lounge where Hijichu was. She had no choice but to sit down angrily and take out her phone to look at the photo she had just taken. Hua Xiaoheng leaned against the armrest of the sofa beside her and looked down at the photo she had just taken on her phone. He felt a little uneasy when he saw that she had been staring at where Luo Piapiao and Luo Yaozu were standing in the photos. However, when he took a closer look at Luo Piapiao, he suddenly felt that she looked a little familiar. From the angle where she was smiling up at the camera, she actually looked a little like the doll that Gunyinji had held in her hands when she was young. Because Hua Xiaoheng was too familiar with Gunyinji's doll, they had used various instruments to analyze it, but they hadn't found anything. In the end, they had only concluded that it was just a doll. But he couldn't say that. He would be exposed the moment he said it. Because the ace of the Far East on this side couldn't possibly know that Gunyinji had brought the doll to the other world when she was 12 years old. Only Hua Xiaoheng, who was in the other world, knew. Therefore, Hua Xiaoheng looked away and quietly walked to the door. He put on his sunglasses and pretended to look around at the snow outside the door. He took a few more photos of Luo Piapiao in the small lounge next to him. His sunglasses were actually a small camera with the function of connecting to the internet and cloud synchronization. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1639, This Shows My Sincerity. A reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets. There would be a second update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1651. 10 minutes later, Dr. Qin Haoshan came again. However, this time he brought an older male doctor with him. The older male doctor examined Luo Yaozu and finally said, "Yes, Luo Yaozu. At present, he had symptoms of temporary coma, headache, nausea, and vomiting. Moreover, they appeared after the back of his head hit the ground, so it was very likely that he had a mild concussion. But it's best to send him to the hospital for a checkup to rule out other problems." "What other situation?" Luo Piapiao was a little nervous. "Didn't he just have a slight concussion? Are there any other problems?" The doctor smiled and patiently explained, "In order to ensure that there are no other problems, we also need to perform an X-ray scan of his skull to confirm that there are no fractures in his brain." Then, we need to do a brain CT scan to make sure that there are no abnormalities in the skull and the brain. Finally, we need to continue to do brainwave tests to ensure that the brainwaves return to normal. Only after these 3 tests are done can we be sure that he only has a concussion and no other diseases. Seeing that the doctor said so and that Luo Yaozu's expression was really ugly, Luo Piapiao could only nod and say, "Then let's go for a checkup." After she finished speaking, she looked at Qin Haoshan and said aggrievedly, "Fourth brother Qin, you must help us. Don't tell our father." Qin Haoshan looked at her with a slight headache. He frowned and said, "Didn't I take you away? Why did you come back?" Luo Piapiao shrunk her neck guiltily and said awkwardly, "We thought it was fun here, so we called a few friends over to play with us after we went back." Qin Haoshan frowned and said disapprovingly, "This isn't a place normal people can come. How did you get in here? If you trespass, you deserve to be beaten to death." "Fourth brother Qin. We didn't barge in without permission," Luo Piapiao hurriedly explained. "We're here to look for a friend. It was Gunyanji. She was my and Yaozu's cousin. We were having a snowball fight with her just now. Then he accidentally knocked his head on the ground." "You got a concussion from a snowball fight? Are you sure you're having a snowball fight and not fighting?" Qin Haoshan didn't believe Luo Piapiao's words at all. These 2 cousins were the type of people who didn't make any big mistakes, but kept on making small mistakes. To them, daily vows were like daily farts. If one believed them, then there was a problem with his own intelligence. Luo Piapiao also knew that she had too many dark histories in front of Qin Haoshan. If she told the truth now, he might not believe her. In fact, Luo Yaozu was hit by a snowball and fell to the ground. The back of his head hit the ground and caused a concussion. Therefore, the real reason was that he fell and hit his head. However, if he admitted this reason, then Luo Piapiao, who encouraged Luo Yaozu to return to Xiangshuahai and took the initiative to drag him into a snowball fight, would become the culprit. She didn't want to be scolded by her family. In a moment of desperation, she looked up and saw the Soviet diplomat who had hit her brother with a snowball standing not far from the door. He was wearing sunglasses and seemed to be looking at the snow. She quickly pointed at him and said, "Look, that's him. He's a Soviet diplomat and a suitor of my cousin, Gunyanji." Qin Haoshan turned around and saw Hua Xiaoheng before he believed that Luo Piapiao was not lying. Especially when he heard that the man was Gunyanji's suitor, his face darkened and he said, "Gunyanji asked this man to do it?" Luo Piapiao was shocked. "No way. How could it be her?" Luo Piapiao's question was purely to express her surprise, but in Qin Haoshan's ears, it became an incredulous question which confirmed his guess. "Isn't it? Tell me honestly, does Yaozu like Gunyanji?" Qin Haoshan knew that this cousin of his was extremely lustful, but the people he dated were all young models and small-time celebrities. Could it be that he was so blind this time and had taken a liking to Gunyanji, who was worse than young models and small-time celebrities? Luo Piapiao felt even more guilty. Her eyes darted around as she said, "How could that be? He just thinks that Gunyanji is beautiful and very warm to us, so he wants to be friends." "That's it." Qin Haoshan interrupted her coldly. "If he does, then get rid of that thought as soon as possible. She's your cousin, close relatives, so she can't get married." Luo Piapiao scoffed. "Brother Qin, we're just cousins and our mothers are only cousins, not biological sisters. Is that considered close relatives?" "Legally, yes. Direct blood relatives and collateral blood relatives within 3 generations are considered close relatives, so they can't get married." Qin Haoshan glared at her. "And it's better if you don't mess with Gunyanji. She can even send her own mother to court. Don't think that she has any kinship with you." Luo Piapiao muttered unhappily. "But she gets along well with us. She's the one who asked us to come up. We think your words are too arbitrary. Nianji isn't that kind of person." "I don't care what kind of person she is, but no matter what, that Soviet diplomat can't do anything to Yaozu because of this." Qin Haoshan waved his hand. "Send Yaozu to the helicopter. I'll take him back for a full examination. Piapiao, follow him. I'll go talk to young Master He and Miss Xia." Luo Piapiao didn't dare to disobey anymore. She followed Luo Yaozu's stretcher onto the helicopter of the Qin private hospital. Qin Haoshan came out of the small lounge and walked to Hua Xiaoheng, who was standing at the door of the other lounge watching the snow. He said in a low voice, "Mr. Peter, I heard that you're a Soviet diplomat?" Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at him and nodded. "I am. May I ask who you are?" Qin Haoshan held back his anger and said, I'm Luo Yaozu and Luo Piapiao's cousin. My name is Qin Haoshan, and I'm also an orthopedic doctor at the Qin Private Hospital. Hua Xiaoheng quickly sized him up and asked, Orthopedic doctor? Did Luo Yaozu suffer a fracture? Qin Haoshan shook his head. No, but he has a slight concussion. Oh, Hua Xiaoheng said lightly. He looked away and continued to look at the snow outside the door. Qin Haoshan was infuriated by Hua Xiaoheng's attitude. He was only 30% angry at first, but now he was 70% angry. His brows almost knitted into a knot. Mr. Peter, what do you mean? Aren't you going to apologize? Just because my cousin and you are pursuing the same woman at the same time, you can't do this to him. What did I do? Hua Xiaoheng looked puzzled. I just had a snowball fight with them. A snowball fight can give my cousin a concussion? Qin Haoshan raised his voice. I look like a retard. Are you going to use such a reason to brush me off? A snowball fight can indeed cause a concussion. If you don't believe me, do you want to try it yourself? Hua Xiaoheng turned around and looked at Qin Haoshan with bright eyes. You have a helicopter anyway. If you have another concussion, just send him directly to the helicopter and bring him to the hospital to recuperate. You are unreasonable. Qin Haoshan was so angry that he was trembling. He pointed his finger at him. Mr. Peter, don't go too far. This is Huaxia territory. A foreigner like you can't do whatever you want. I'm sorry, diplomats can indeed do whatever they want. Because I have diplomatic immunity. Hua Xiaoheng once again threw out his identity as a diplomat, making Qin Haoshan almost speechless. This was today's second update, chapter 1640, I've taken a liking to her. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Moi everyone little angels. Chapter 1652. Qin Haoshan glared at Hua Xiaoheng for a while. Seeing how confident Hua Xiaoheng was, he knew he couldn't do anything to him. Qin's private group's strength lay in the business world, not in politics. In the past, they had Qin Yaoguang and He Qingjian's relationship, so everyone in the political world gave the Qin Corporation face. However, now that Qin Yaoguang had not only divorced He Qingjian, but had also been sent to prison by her own daughter, the Qin Corporation's private group no longer had that much face in the political world. Furthermore, this Mr. Peter is a Soviet Union diplomat, and he is not related to China's politics. Qin Haoshan stormed away from Hua Xiaoheng and went to Gunyanji. He ignored He Zhichu, who was sitting silently on the other side. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he said to Gunyanji with a straight face, Miss Gu, my cousin is not good enough for you. He doesn't dare to try to get close to you. Please don't be with him anymore. Gunyanji had originally felt a little apologetic about Luo Yaozu's injury, but now that she heard Qin Haoshan's words, the anger in her heart suddenly rose. She suddenly stood up and coldly said to Qin Haoshan's back, Stop. What do you mean by that? When will I be with your cousin? You are ruining my reputation with your nonsense. I can sue you for slander. Qin Haoshan had long been very unhappy with Gunyanji because of Qin Yaoguang's lawsuit. At this moment, seeing that she had no intention of repentance at all, not only did she not apologize at all for causing Luo Yaozu's concussion, but she even used the word complain. She could not hold it in any longer. He stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Gunyanji. His regular features were contorted from holding back. Another complaint? Miss Gu, what's wrong with you? Specifically suing his own family? Gunyanji clenched her fists and enunciated each word clearly. I specialize in suing guilty people. No matter who that person was. Mr. Qin's words were completely ignorant of the law. Can't I sue my family? Do family members have forgiveness talismans? Qin Haoshan was tongue-tied by Gunyanji's question. He couldn't think of how to respond, so he could only vaguely say, These are two completely different things. Don't sue people just because you're a lawyer. The court is not for you alone. I just fought a lawsuit. How did the court become my family's? Your court only hears one case every few decades? Gunyanji didn't hesitate to mock them. Qin Haoshan flew into a rage out of humiliation. His fair and clear face gradually flushed red, and in a moment of carelessness, he spoke out the thoughts in the bottom of his heart. You have such a vile character, you're disloyal, unfilial, and disobedient to your birth mother. No matter how good your conditions are, you're not a good match. I'd rather my cousin spend the rest of his life with young models and small-time celebrities than let him marry you. In other words, Gunyanji was inferior to those young models and small-time celebrities. Gunyanji was stunned for a moment and couldn't hold it in anymore. She doubled over in laughter. Oh my God. You make it sound like I want to marry that cousin of yours. She pointed at Hijichu, who was sitting diagonally behind her. See that? Young master, he was engaged to me before, but I didn't want to marry him, so I broke off the engagement with him. She then pointed at Hua Xiaoheng, who was standing at the door with his hands leaning against the door frame and a smile as he sized them up. Over there, Mr. Peter, the Soviet diplomat, has been relentlessly pursuing me. So, Mr. Qin, where did you get the nerve to say that I like your cousin and want to marry him? She retracted her smile and said with a straight face, Are you blind or are you retarded for you to say such ridiculous words? Qin Haoshan frowned. Didn't you have a good impression of my cousin, so you specially let them come here to play? Your cousin and cousin came to the foot of the mountain by themselves and were stopped, so they used me as a cover. I pitied them, so I asked young master he to let them up. How did it become me having a good impression of your cousin? Is your cousin's family background better than young master he, or is his looks better than Mr. Peter? I don't even like these two people, so how could I like your cousin? Gun Yinji was eloquent, and in the end she said, Actually, your cousin is still a little better than you. At least he knows his place, unlike you who don't know what to do. You deserve to never get the person you love. Gun Yinji's last sentence stepped on Qin Haoshan's sore spot. He had a crush on Xie Qingying, but he didn't dare to say a word. He had originally planned to propose to Xie Qingying when she was 30 years old if she still didn't get married. At that time, there would be very few men who would be willing to marry a 30-year-old woman, so he wouldn't have any decent competitors. But this time he could tell that Xie Qingying seemed to have a different feeling for Hijichu. Hijichu was already a bachelor. If he had good taste, he would probably accept Xie Qingying. And wouldn't he be just like Gun Yinji had said? He wouldn't be able to get the person he loved for the rest of his life. Qin Haoshan was practically jumping with rage. The veins on his forehead were popping, and his well-featured face was almost distorted. Gun Yinji didn't let him go. She mocked him from the side. What's wrong? Are you so angry that you can't speak? Did I hit a sore spot for you? Look at your gaze. It's like you want to kill me. She turned to look at Hijichu and put on a pitiful expression. Young master you have surveillance cameras here, right? You have to take a picture of his ugly appearance. If anything happens to me in the future, he'll be the first suspect. Hijichu was still sitting and didn't move, but his cold gaze had already looked over. It was as if a layer of ice had condensed around his body, emitting traces of cold air. Qin Haoshan's heated mind was poured with cold water by Hijichu. He shivered slightly and glared at Gun Yinji. He rushed to say, I finally understand what it means to be the guilty party suing first. Even dogs would despise someone like you if you were thrown on the street. Who would have nothing better to do than to harm you? Gun Yinji snorted and immediately retorted, Ask your good aunt Qin Yaoguang if she's worse than a dog. You actually said that your biological mother is worse than a dog. Qin Haoshan felt that he had never seen such a vile woman who openly insulted his mother. I'm following your logic. Gun Yinji calmed down and took a step forward. You just said that even dogs despise people like me and won't bite me. But your good aunt Qin Yaoguang kidnapped me violently and tried to hurt me. Tell me, isn't she worse than a dog? Qin Haoshan waved his hand. You're quibbling. She's your biological mother. There's no such thing as a violent kidnapping. She just wants to see you and take you away from the He family. Why would a biological mother need to kidnap her biological daughter illegally? This is a false proposition. If she wanted to take you away, she wouldn't need any violent means. Even the He family wouldn't be able to stop her. Gun Yinji crossed her arms and sneered, That's right, why? Why didn't she use her identity as my biological mother and directly come to the He family to see me and take me away? Why did she have to use underhanded methods to kidnap me? Why did she frame my father at the same time? Go and ask her, what secrets does she have from me? Qin Haoshan also sensed that something was wrong. He had never thought about it from this perspective before. He had always thought that Gu Xiangguan had tried to take his daughter away and eventually framed Qin Yaoguang. Later, he had heard about the court trial from other relatives, but he still thought that Qin Yaoguang had come up with this plan because she missed her daughter and wanted to share the burden for her beloved. But now that he heard Gun Yinji's words, the mistake in his thinking was revealed, and his eyes were filled with fog. But after thinking about it, he still felt that Gun Yinji had done more wrong. Qin Haoshan's expression cleared up slightly. He looked Gun Yinji up and down and said, There are all kinds of parents in the world. No matter what wrong your mother did as children, we can only be filial to them. After all, they gave us life, raised us, and gave us food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. You can't stop. Gunyenji made a paused gesture in a sports match and said, "From a legal point of view, what you said just now is completely wrong. Parents can also do wrong and break the law. If children blindly appease them, it will only encourage them to make mistakes and make them more and more outrageous. This isn't filial piety. This is flattery. It's deliberately harming them. Mr. Qin, don't tell me that the premise of your filial piety to your parents is to harm them." Gunyenji really felt that saying that Qin Haoshan's brain was filled with water was flattering him. Because it wasn't water that had entered his brain, but concrete. Qin Haoshan opened his mouth and realized that no matter what he said, he would fall into Gunyenji's trap. He could only purse his lips tightly and snort heavily. He turned around to leave. Only then did Hijichu stand up lazily and say coldly, "Qin Haoshan, apologize to Miss Gu." Qin Haoshan suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Hijichu in surprise. He rubbed his ears. "Young Master He, what did you say?" This is the first update of the day, Chapter 1641, Stepping on His Sore Feet. Remind everyone of your recommendation votes. Today is Monday, right? Recommendation votes are very important. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Billions Chasing You for your 100,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Congratulations to Billions Chasing You for becoming the 29th leader of Hello, Major General. I've already written down the updates in my notebook. Don't be anxious. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1653. More and more people began to gather at the entrance of the lounge. Xie Qingyin and her best friend stood at the door and witnessed everything. I said, "Apologize to Miss Gu." Hijichu took a step forward calmly. "You were spouting nonsense just now. Not only did you damage Miss Gu's reputation, but you also polluted our ears." Qin Haoshan's face turned even redder from Hijichu's humiliation. He glared at Gunyenji hatefully, but when he thought about how Gunyenji had spoken so harshly just now, he knew that Gunyenji still had some weight in Hijichu's eyes. Therefore he didn't continue arguing with Gunyenji. Of course he didn't apologize either. He turned around and left with a straight face. Gunyenji watched the show from behind and egged him on. "Look, young Master He, your words don't work. He doesn't even care about you." Yes, it's quite embarrassing. Hijichu smiled faintly and said with a double meaning. "But what can I do? I can only forgive him. But in the future I'll have to not appear wherever he appears." Hijichu's words completely ended any chance Qin Haoshan had of rising up in the upper echelons of the Wuxia Empire. He would never be able to go any further. Unless he apologized to Gunyenji and Gunyenji was willing to forgive him. Otherwise, Qin Haoshan wouldn't be able to get any invitations whenever Hijichu appeared. Was there a need to say who the organizers would choose between him and Hijichu? Gunyenji clicked her tongue. "Young Master He, you're too ruthless, but I like it." Hijichu's gloomy mood was miraculously cured. He rubbed her head and smiled again. Qin Haoshan walked to the door with a livid face. Huo Xiaoheng crossed his arms and said the same thing, apologize to Miss Gu." Qin Haoshan didn't dare lose his temper at Hijichu, but it was different with Huo Xiaoheng. He was just a Soviet diplomat, and yet he wanted to meddle in the affairs of the Wuxia Empire? Qin Haoshan didn't even look at him. He reached out to push him away and continued walking out. Huo Xiaoheng reached out like lightning and grabbed Qin Haoshan's extended arm. His other hand grabbed his chin and twisted it. Qin Haoshan's chin was dislocated. "Since you're not going to apologize, then don't talk for now." Huo Xiaoheng clapped his hands as if he was dusting them. Qin Haoshan felt that his wrist was gripped like an iron clamp, and he couldn't break free at all. Only when Huo Xiaoheng let go of him could he cover his chin and glare at Huo Xiaoheng before quickly running out. When he ran past Xie Qingyin, she sighed and said, "I didn't expect Mr. Qin to be such a person. In the future, I won't dare to go anywhere Mr. Qin appears." It could be said that no one's words dealt a greater blow to Qin Haoshan than Xie Qingyin. His face turned pale. He wanted to say something, but his jaw was dislocated and he couldn't say anything. He could only run to the place where his helicopter was parked. Soon, the roar of the helicopter sounded above Xiangshuahai. The helicopter of the Qin's private hospital flew away. Gunyenji snorted disdainfully. "Spoil sport." She turned to look at Hijichu and said unhappily, "Young Master He, I want to go home." "I'll take you back." He Jichu nodded. Hua Xiaoheng quickly walked over and said, I can take her back. We're on the way. Gu Nianji deliberately didn't look at him. She smiled at He Jichu and said, Thank you, young master He. He Jichu patted her shoulder. I'll wait for you outside. He Jichu walked out of the lounge first and Gu Nianji followed. Hua Xiaoheng caught up with her in large strides and grabbed her wrist like lightning. He smiled and said, Miss Gu, give me a chance. There were so many people watching, so Gu Nianji didn't show any mercy at all. She slapped the back of Hua Xiaoheng's hand and said, Let go. How many times have I told you that it's impossible between us? She pushed Hua Xiaoheng's hand away and quickly walked to the door. However, Xie Qingying stood at the door and quietly stopped her. Gu Nianji looked at her in surprise. Cousin Xie, what's the matter? Xie Qingying had a disapproving expression on her face and said aloofly, Nianji, I think you should apologize to young master He too. Gu Nianji didn't notice the look of embarrassment that flashed across He Jichu's eyes just now, but Xie Qingying saw it clearly. At that moment, her heart ached for this man, and she felt that she loved him even more than before. Because she loved him, she couldn't bear to see him suffer even the slightest bit. Gu Nianji didn't understand. What? Did I offend young master He? She thought about what had happened carefully, but still didn't understand what she had done wrong. Xie Qingying saw this and pulled her into the lounge. She gestured for her best friend to take the crowd away before saying to Gu Nianji, You said in front of Qin Haoshan that you didn't want to marry young master He, so you broke off the engagement with him. Have you ever thought about how humiliating such words are to a man? Gu Nianji, she blinked her big jade-like eyes at Xie Qingying and gradually became aggrieved. But when Qin Haoshan humiliated me just now, none of you stood up for me. You just stood at the door and watched the show. Now you're saying that I'm in the wrong. What can I do? Am I the grass on the ground that he can step on as he pleases? She was like a little hedgehog. Anything related to Qin Yaoguang and the Qin family would make her stand up with thorns all over her body. She couldn't care less. The person who could protect her wasn't here. Was it wrong for her to protect herself? Gu Nianji's eyes turned red. Hua Xiaoheng saw this from the side and felt his heart ache. He quickly walked over and put one hand on Gu Nianji's shoulder. He said to Xie Qingying aloofly, Miss Xie, it's understandable that you want to please your sweetheart, but you can't wrong others to please your sweetheart. Hua Xiaoheng hugged Gu Nianji tightly and said to Xie Qingying coldly, Don't let me see you talking to Miss Gu like that again. You even said you were Miss Gu's relative. You're siding with outsiders. As he spoke, he led Gu Nianji out of the lounge, leaving Xie Qingying standing there awkwardly. She thought about it carefully and felt ashamed. The Soviet diplomat was right. Although Gu Nianji was her cousin, she was more concerned about He Jichu, who had nothing to do with her. When Gu Nianji had a conflict with He Jichu, she had almost no choice but to stand on He Jichu's side. Realizing this, Xie Qingying knew that her little bit of plastic sisterhood with Gu Nianji had disappeared. It wasn't that she didn't feel regret. Gu Nianji was brought to He Jichu's helicopter by Hua Xiaoheng with mixed feelings. Do you still want to take his helicopter? Hua Xiaoheng adjusted the collar of Gu Nianji's coat. Gu Nianji looked at Hua Xiaoheng in a daze and suddenly said, Mr. Peter, do you know? There was once a person who let me know how good it is to live in this world. Beside him, no one can humiliate me so unscrupulously. Hua Xiaoheng, Gu Nianji looked at him expectantly. Her big eyes were filled with tears that were about to fall. Hua Xiaoheng calmly stroked her head. I can do it too. I will treat you just like this in the future. No one will dare to humiliate you so unscrupulously by my side. This was the second update of the day, chapter 1642, I can do it too. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Today is Monday, right? Recommendation votes are very important. Moi, everyone little angels, that you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.